This episode of Derek and Matt Love Comics recorded October 7th, 2018. You can find Derek and Matt Love Comics on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, and TuneIn. You can contact the show, Derek and Matt Love Comics at gmail.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/Derek and Matt, on Twitter at Derek and Matt, on Instagram at Derek and Matt, and watch the show on YouTube at Derek and Matt Love Comics. Enjoy the show. Hey yo, comic book fans, it's Matt, and you're listening to Derek and Matt Love Comics, the show where two friends talk sci-fi, movies, animation, and of course comic books, and all things we geek out about. With me as always is my neighbor to the north, Captain Cornwall himself, Derek. How's it going, Derek?
Not too bad this week. I say that, but I'm lying. I just want to quickly say, being 42 sucks. Wake up today, feeling a little under the weather, decide to take a nap after puttering around the apartment for a few hours. So take a nap, wake up from that nap, feeling a little better, except for now I have a stabbing pain in my neck and my shoulder.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be pining for the glory days of when I was 40. Just 2 years later, and already missing it.
Everything's been downhill since I turned 13.
That sounds about right. So yeah, we had, just to quickly fill you in, we did have plans for these 5 big Halloween shows in the month of October because of the 5-week month. We had to miss recording last week because Derek had a family emergency come up. We're not really going to talk about that, but unfortunately that leaves us with 4 shows for the month of October. Now, what we're doing is we are going to do 4 of the announced 5 shows that we originally planned on, and then it will be the Movie Monster episode, which is the one we are recording right now, the one you are listening to right now. We are still going to do Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, and Charlie Brown, Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. I almost said Charlie Brown Christmas, and that's not right. So we dropped the Comic Book Monsters episode, and hey, there's always next year. You know, sometimes life comes up, and this is neither of our real jobs, first jobs, or first responsibilities in life. It's just something we enjoy doing, so sometimes it has to take a backseat.
I'm not even sure if this is a hobby. Is it? I don't know.
I consider it a hobby.
I consider it something I do to hang out with you.
I spend money on it, and I don't see any money for it, so yeah, it's a hobby.
I don't spend any money on it.
Yeah, because I'm shouldering the load here.
I'm such a jerk.
So, what we've been doing these last 2 weeks is quite a bit. I think we'll change it up and we'll do what we've both been doing, because that's going to be a lot of good conversation this week, I think.
Yeah, I think that's going to be most of the conversation.
So, as always, and if you listened to the show last year, or if you've listened to the show at any length of time, you know that I watch a lot of horror movies around Halloween, and to the point that I started in September to try to get them all in. Didn't really get that many in September this year, because every year of my life I have more and more responsibilities, and we're not going to get back into that. But we did manage to hit a good amount this week, and these last 2 weeks. So, with minimal discussion on all of them, we watched Re-Animator, which is always fun.
Oh, yeah. Geez, I can't even remember when exactly we watched that, if it was immediately after we last recorded.
That sounds right.
We didn't watch it last week, but yeah, we watched it almost 2 weeks ago now.
Going to my Letterboxd movie diary and finding out when we watched Re-Animator. We watched it on the 23rd, so...
Sunday.
That would have been Sunday, because the previous movie that I have that we watched was on the 22nd. We watched Killer Clowns, which we did talk about on the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I mean, that one's always fun. It's one that I hadn't seen until a couple of years ago. I think we talked about that last year. It's amazing to me, because I also started re-listening to the book on Audible. It's amazing to me how the movie is both accurate and completely inaccurate to the book.
Either way, it is a hoot.
Yeah, it's essentially the first 2, maybe 3 chapters of the book. The book's only 5 chapters. And a lot of the dialogue is lifted, and a lot of, the situations are lifted, but then it's changed to be the 1980s. It's changed to be a little bit more of a comedy. Is it a comedy or is it just messed up? I can never tell.
Oh, it is definitely a horror comedy. The thing is, it does not skimp on the comedy and it does not skimp on the horror. It fully embodies both. I just want to quickly say one thing about this movie, and that is that rewatching this film, I don't know how many times I've seen it, maybe half a dozen, maybe a dozen, maybe more. Jeffrey Combs is horribly, criminally underrated as an actor because he is just so pitch perfect brilliant in this film. I don't think I've ever seen him give a bad performance.
He was the Scarecrow on the new Batman Adventures.
Just genius casting.
It is. It's very good. Then we went on a little bit of a Frankenstein binge, watching the original Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. Was this in one night? No, it was back-to-back nights.
We watched Frankenstein and Bride back-to-back.
Right, and then Son the next day.
I don't think it was the next day. It was a few days later.
It was the 28th. We watched the other two on the 27th. As I mentioned, really? I have a movie diary on not Flickchart, on Letterboxd.
Oh, well, I thought it was a few days difference, but I shall defer to you.
So, yeah, I mean, Frankenstein is great. I will always say that movie's great, but I always say that Bride of Frankenstein is the better film. I think Bride of Frankenstein is actually the best Universal monster movie.
By far.
But you talk about criminally underrated. Son of Frankenstein, criminally underrated. Really solid film. Good performances all around. Basil Rathbone is great. Karloff's last time playing the monster, he's great. Lugosi as Igor, he's great. The thing that, and I probably mentioned this last year, but the thing that always strikes me about this movie is how most people don't realize that this is the movie that Young Frankenstein is mostly parodying. Yes, Young Frankenstein makes fun of the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, but the overall plot structure of Young Frankenstein is largely lifted from this movie, with the young Frankenstein returning to the home country to find the villagers not happy that he's back, and dealing with a suspicious one-armed police inspector, and deciding to take up the work of the family again, and another monster gets set loose. It's not beat for beat, but it is largely the same plot structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Son of Frankenstein is... it is, cream of the crop for the Universal monsters. I think the other thing is these three Frankenstein films are, quite frankly, the only really good Frankenstein films in the Universal Monsters series.
Oh yeah, because it goes downhill from here, and I mean we could count Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Well, that one's good.
But I mean Frankenstein in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, not so good. And there's the whole thing where at one, the one movie ends with them putting Igor's brain in the Frankenstein monster's body, and then the next movie it's Lugosi as the monster, and they cut out all of his lines because people in the test screenings were laughing at his accent coming out of the monster. Plus, he had gone blind in the previous movie, so with the lines of dialogue cut out, you just have him lumbering around very, very meekly, and it's just a weak performance from Frankenstein. And after that, you have the couple of appearances by Glenn Strange in House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein that are not exactly, Glenn Strange is lucky he got to play the monster in Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein. Otherwise, he would have played the monster in nothing but not memorable films.
Right. The other thing is, whenever Lugosi played him, he, as you stated in the previous movie, he played Igor and the movie ended with him going blind, with his brain being transferred into the Frankenstein body. So that's why in the next one, where Lugosi actually plays Frankenstein with Igor's brain, he lumbers around so much more with his arms outstretched because he's blind and he can't see and he's feeling around. And that is the film that so many people for generations have copied whenever they do a Frankenstein type walk with the arms raised out in front. It's because they're spoofing that film. which is bizarre because that's the movie where Frankenstein's blind. It's just that one.
Right. So that was in Ghost of, if I'm trying to line these up, it's in Ghost of Frankenstein that Lugosi plays Igor again and gets transferred into the monster.
Right.
And then it's in
with Lon Chaney.
With Lon Chaney as the monster.
The monster.
And then it's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, where it's Lugosi as the monster.
I think so. I think that's how it lines up.
Meets the Wolfman.
Well, yeah, because Lon Chaney couldn't play the monster in that because he was playing the Wolfman, and they have a fight.
Yes, you were right. Yeah, Bela Lugosi is the Frankenstein's monster. The first of the ensemble monster films combining characters from several film series.
I still kind of want to watch that. I haven't watched that or Ghost in maybe 12 years.
I don't remember Ghost being terrible, but probably because of the strength of Lugosi as Igor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think, okay, Lugosi's signature role was Dracula, but I think his greatest performances were as Igor.
He did the thing.
Young Frankenstein, I've been seeing Young Frankenstein since I was a kid, so it's kind of ruined the name for me. I just automatically say that pronunciation, which is a gag.
Well, they were wrong, weren't they? We also watched one of my ones that is a Halloween film to me, but for different reasons, and that's War of the Worlds, the original 50s version.
I think it qualifies.
I think it qualifies. But, I mean, I connect War of the Worlds to Halloween because of the radio play, which was done on the eve of Halloween.
And that was the connection I was thinking of.
Yeah, and I'm a big War of the Worlds fan, and I really like that particular movie, so I always watch that movie at Halloween. Another one that's iconic, right? Like we talk a lot on the show about like those movies that have a sound effect that when you hear it, your brain just lights up because you know what the movie is instantly or whatever. And I feel like all the noises, the heat ray and the teleportation, or not the teleportation, the levitation of the Martian war machines in this, they all have those noises that they're super memorable sci-fi noises.
Yeah, what would you call it? The dolly effects? The sound effects in that film are...
I think Foley was what you're looking for.
Foley. I said dolly. Jeez. Yeah, the Foley effects in that film are... well, you already said iconic, but they are so distinct. And as you said, you instantly recognize them. I mean, that film, those sound effects have been aped and used in countless other movies as homages to that film over the decades. I think they're even used in some of the Star Wars movies. Yeah,
okay, so you've got the heat ray, and then you've got the little green beams that come out of the lower parts of the ship, and those have a different noise, and I think those noises are heard in Star Wars for some of the laser blasters on the ships, you know.
I believe, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the heat ray beam, whatever you want to call it, is used extensively in the climax of The Iron Giant.
I think you're right.
Yeah, well, the Iron Giant was largely, it was an adaptation of the 1960s book, but it was also, the movie itself was an homage to a lot of the 50s science fiction Red Menace films.
Right.
Which War of the Worlds was like one of the iconic ones for that. But yeah, no, it's a fun movie to watch.
And it's the source of the name for Dr. Clayton Forrester on Mystery Science Theater.
I always forget about that.
It's also mentioned in the beginning of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, so...
How many 1950s science fiction films weren't?
No, yeah, you're right. I was looking at IMDb here because I thought it would tell me, okay, 2 of the sound effects of the film eventually became iconic sounds on Star Trek. The sound of the war machines hovering went on to be the sound of the hand phaser, and the sound of the skeleton ray, as Dr. Forrester called it, became the sound of the photon torpedo. That was the sound effect I was trying to come up with.
I never noticed that before, but now that you mention it, I can totally picture it. Yeah. Wow.
Also, we watched a kaiju film, which is not really a Halloween film, but I was in a kaiju mood for reasons we'll get to later. And
you say that, but they're still monsters.
Oh, absolutely. They're absolutely monster films. So, but we watched Invasion of Astro Monster, also known as Monster Zero, which is the second King Ghidorah movie where Godzilla and Rodan are taken to Planet X, lent out to the. Did that race have a name, or are they just the people from Planet X?
I completely blanked. I have no memory of what their name is, if they even have one. In my defense, that's because you and I were riffing on this movie the entire time we were watching it.
Okay, so I remember this movie as being one of the better, and I mean like top cream of the crop, Showa Godzilla movies. After watching it with you the other night, and I've seen it in the last 5 years, I think, but after watching it with you the other night, I've come to the conclusion that I am remembering it that way entirely based on the first monster fight that takes place on Planet X. The movie is slow, it is goofy, it is not in the cream of the crop of the Showa series, but it's also not like terrible like Godzilla's Revenge,
Right.
but it is super riffable, so we were riffing.
Yeah, this is a film, it's one of only 3 of the Showa Godzilla films that I own on DVD. I got it, I think, 10 years ago. Yeah, because I believe it came out on Toho. Toho released it on home video in North America, I believe, in 2007. I watched it back then. I had not watched it since because I was actually disappointed in the movie when I originally watched it because I thought it was boring and dull and long, and you really don't get very much of Godzilla or any of the monsters. And I largely think that's I still believe that. The difference is watching it with you was a heck of a lot more fun.
So yeah, they were called the Xylians, but
Yeah,
they were
I know.
the people from Planet X. Yeah, and there's also the weird thing in that movie about all the monsters have names. There's King Ghidorah, there's Godzilla, and there's Rodan. But the Xylians refer to King Ghidorah as Monster Zero, and then they refer to Godzilla as Monster 01, and they refer to Rodan as Monster 02. Maybe the Xylians don't know how to count.
It's possible.
Even though they were such an advanced civilization of identical women and and guys in Devo helmets.
Are we
Yeah.
not human?
Huh?
Are we not men? We are Devo. Yeah, they look like a planet full of new wave band members.
And then you got Nick Adams playing the American in it, and
I know who Nick Adams is. I've known who Nick Adams was since I was a kid. And this is the very first time watching this movie the other night with you where I went, oh my goodness, Nick Adams looks exactly like Lloyd Bridges. I'd never noticed that before. Now I can't unsee it.
Yeah, and also in the movie, and I'm wondering if this is some Japanese screenwriter's idea of what Americans should talk like, but he's totally like a mix of the over stereotypical American, cowboy type and like a gangster type. He's like Cagney playing a cowboy almost.
Oh yeah.
As an astronaut.
It's bizarre. It's weird. Also, kind of a stretch where he's Astronaut Glenn. Jeez, I wonder where they got that name from.
Yeah. And also, so I'm going to agree with you, what you said the other night. They probably thought they were getting Lloyd Bridges.
Oh, probably thought Sea Hunt, very good. Wrong TV show.
Yeah, it's something. But there is a good fight between Godzilla and Rodan and King Ghidorah on Planet X, and a lot of the plot is very similar to the plot in what is the Destroy All Monsters, as far as the aliens coming in and taking control of the monsters. That happens in Destroy All Monsters.
Right. My thing with the plot of this movie, though, is that it has too many steps where it doesn't make any sense. The aliens have King Ghidorah, who is terrorizing them. They say. We end up later on finding out that they actually can control King Ghidorah. So they send emissaries to Earth to make a deal to bring Godzilla and Mothra to their planet to defeat King Ghidorah, and then leaving Earth defenseless, or at least without giant monsters, so they can invade the Earth, and then you invade the Earth by using King Ghidorah, Godzilla, and Rodan. And it's like they could have easily, because once they make the deal with the Earth, they just take the monsters anyways. They could have just easily have done that to begin with, without having to go through all the pretense. The whole point was just to have a twist that it was completely unnecessary and made no sense.
Right, and it made the movie extra long by doing that.
Which is weird because isn't it like an 88-minute movie?
No, 94 minutes.
94.
But it's a long 94 minutes.
Yeah, it feels a lot longer than that. But yeah, on the plus side, it is extremely riffable.
Also, the one guy's name is Tetsuo, and the American voice actor dub, they keep calling him Tetsui.
One problem with this movie that really bugs me is the title. I keep wanting to say Invasion of the Astro Monster.
Which would make sense. Yeah, it's a little bit of an English name, being Invasion of Astro Monster. But the thing that I noticed, though, was that I don't think I've noticed before, was that, man, Godzilla is agile in this. He's, like, rolling and falling to the ground. Like, that suit is really maneuverable in this movie. You hear other stories of, like, the earlier films where the suit is, 150 pounds and he can barely move. But
he's flat out doing William Shatner, Captain Kirk roles throughout this movie.
Yeah, he totally is. So,
and then he's got the victory dance, jump, skip it.
Yeah, if you've ever seen the image of Godzilla jumping and like basically clicking his heels together and putting his hands in the air, like doing the victory jump pose, that's this movie.
If I was ever to get someone to watch a couple of Godzilla or even just 50s and 60s kaiju films and say that these are legitimate movies, they can be really, really good, this is not going to be one of the examples I'm going to give.
No, there's better stuff. There's better stuff in the Showa series for sure.
Oh, gosh. The original Gojira, Rodan I would use.
Yeah.
That's a really good movie.
Again, Destroy All Monsters, similar plot, but Destroy All Monsters is great, so watch that. And nobody talks about it, but watch the two Mechagodzilla the movies at the end of the Showa series, because they kind of go back in tone to being not exactly dark, but a lot more serious than most of the Showa stuff. So those two movies are a great 1-2 punch to finish out the...
I don't know about you, but I'm suddenly in the mood for watching Mothra vs. Godzilla, because that's a better movie.
You talking about the Showa one or the Heisei one?
Showa.
Because the Heisei one might be my favorite Godzilla film. But yeah, the Showa one's good.
The Showa one is Mothra vs. Godzilla. The Heisei one is Godzilla vs. Mothra.
Or sometimes called Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth.
I'm just saying, Mothra gets top billing in their first meetup.
Oh, right. Yeah. And even though the beginning of that movie is largely a remake of the Mothra solo film, that's Mothra's first appearance, that movie kind of ignores the existence of the first Mothra film and recaps it for the first half.
Oh, it's almost like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
Exactly. It is very similar to that. Stepping away from monster movies, we watched Solo, a Star Wars story. Derek's first time, my second time.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I was going to get it, but I ended up actually picking it up on Blu-ray. Was it 2 weeks ago now, or a week and a half ago?
Yeah.
I don't get it. This was a fun, entertaining movie.
I really, really enjoyed it more the second time.
I want to watch it again, just to see if I was right, because I had a lot of fun watching this. I was expecting it to be a real dog of a movie, but it ended up being really, really fun, entertaining.
Yeah, there's still parts of it that bother me, but I really enjoyed it a lot the second time. And man, like Woody Harrelson's just killing it in everything lately, so it's worth it for him.
Woody Harrelson, he's always good.
I know he's always good, but he's like really, really been good lately.
People forget how versatile Woody Harrelson is.
Yeah, I'll talk about him again later. So, but yeah, I mean, I like Lando in it. I like Chewie in it. I like.
Oh, Chewie! Oh my God! Wait, Chewie's debut in the movie, I loved it.
Oh, that was a great setup. Like, even
Oh.
as a Star Wars fan, and I'm going, of course it's going to be Chewbacca. There's nothing else it can be. It was still a great scene.
Oh, man. I love Chewbacca so much. It was really fun getting to see him in the early days and that. But no, Donald Glover was exactly as people said. He was phenomenal as Lando. Suddenly forgot his name. Alden Ehrenreich
Yes.
as Han was so much better than I expected. I was, more than anything, I was worried about his performance with this movie because they kept. I thought it was a really, really bad sign when they were filming this last summer, or I should say summer 2017. It was a really bad sign when you actually have the studio saying that they were bringing in acting coaches for your lead. And I thought, man, how bad is he going to be in this movie? And he was actually really good. I was surprised at how much chemistry he had with Woody Harrelson, how much chemistry he had with Donald Glover, how much chemistry he had with Chewbacca. Yeah, I thought he was really, really good in the film.
Yeah, I don't know how much of the damage was just from Lord and Miller's improv stuff that made them bring in the acting coach. I guess we'll never know. But yeah, underrated film. Check it out if you haven't, because is it the best Star Wars film? No. Is it a great Star Wars film? No. Is it a fun fill-in Star Wars film? Absolutely.
Yeah, Star Wars or not, I just think it's an entertaining crackerjack movie.
The other thing that we watched together, we actually watched with our mutual friend Dan, was WWE's Super Showdown, which was their pay-per-view from Australia. We did not watch it live because nobody wanted to get up at 4 in the morning or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's a bit much.
Although, I mean, credit to Dan, because our friend Dan lives in the UK, so when we're watching it on a regular time, he's watching it in the morning. So, but it was I enjoyed watching the show. It was very inconsequential, and it had a couple of really good matches and a couple of really weird booking decisions, but it just felt, it wasn't just a glorified house show, but it was a step above a glorified house show, I guess.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
No, I would agree with that. The only problem is the few matches that were really good, I just thought were overshadowed by the mediocrity of basically the rest of the show.
See, I didn't think that was a bad. Really, was there a bad match on the show? I mean, even the matches like.
I don't. There was nothing that was outright terrible, but there was, most of it was just mediocre.
I mean, the New Day and the Bar have had a dozen matches, and this was another one. It wasn't a great one. It wasn't a terrible one. It was just another match that those guys had, So
the comparison to a house show is very fitting because it was just basically most of these matches were either feuds that have gone on too long, ones where they're just spinning their wheels for the next matchup or the next big pay-per-view, and then weird exhibition matches that meant nothing.
Right.
And bizarre booking.
Right.
I don't even understand why John Cena was there.
He was there because it was a show in a huge foreign market, and he was there for the same reason Triple H and Undertaker were there. They're not regular roster guys, but they needed big star power because of the fact they were going to a foreign country.
Yeah, I know that, but the thing is, in the last few years, whenever Cena comes back, he usually, for however long they have him, he's usually doing the really good matches. He had, over the last couple of years, has really stepped up his game whenever he's there. He's got all the side stuff with the movies now, which is fine. But whenever he's there, you really get the impression that he is taking it seriously. But then the match last night, it's Bobby Lashley getting beat up the entire match. And they drag out the hot tag, and they drag it out, and they drag it out, and they drag it out. Cena gets in, does like 2 moves, and that's it.
I have to think that at this point, it has something to do with the movie insurance. And he's not allowed to do very much in the ring because of the insurance for whatever movie he's currently doing.
Which is fine. I understand that. I get that. But if that's the case, don't put him in a big match like this.
I don't think this was a big match.
It's just, I don't know. It just felt like a waste. You have John Cena, and he's going to do two moves. That's it. I don't know. I was not impressed with the pay-per-view. It's just funny because WWE SummerSlam back in August was great. That was a really, really good pay-per-view. Much better than anyone, including myself, expected. I'm not trying to give it faint praise or a backhanded compliment. I'm saying it was a really, really great pay-per-view. But ever since then, everything that they've been doing has been, frankly, mediocre at best. I don't know, it just makes me a little bit disappointed and sad. I'm really hoping that Evolution in a couple of weeks is going to be much better and not follow the same pattern.
Well, I think Evolution's going to be a regular pay-per-view and not just a glorified house show. So
I would hope so.
So what did you do on your own this week, Derek?
The funny thing about this is I haven't really done much specifically on my own. The two things that I've been watching recently are directly because of my sister. A little background, I had seasons 1 through 5 of Two Broke Girls on DVD. I don't know if you've ever seen the show.
I have.
It's not a very good show.
I could understand that.
But it's a show I keep collecting the DVDs. I had never seen it before I got the first season, and I got the first season. My sister bought it for me for, I think, my birthday. That was, I think, 2012, I think. And that was just because it had Kat Dennings, and I really like Kat Dennings. And so, I got that season, ended up watching it back then, and my sister or myself just kept getting, either she would buy them for me or I would buy them for myself, the seasons. And last week, my sister decided she wanted to rewatch all 5 of the sets that I owned, and so I lent them to her, and I ended up watching a lot of the episodes. Well, with her, I'd go and step into the other room and she'd be watching it. So I'd end up watching along. Then, coincidentally, I was out doing my weekly grocery shopping, and I was at Walmart on this past Thursday when I happened to just, again, purely coincidental, walk down an aisle, turn and look, and there was season 6, the last season, on DVD for $15. Ended up buying that. Surprised when I got home because I checked the receipt and it was actually $10, which is an even better deal. So I ended up buying season 6. My sister watched that, and as of yesterday, I am now watching it, and I am about a third of the way through the season now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are very short episodes. They're only like 20, 21 minutes. It's not like you're watching a sitcom from the 60s or 70s when it was like 25 to 27 minutes. So it's much easier to crank out a bunch of them now. But the thing is, I'm watching the show. I do laugh occasionally. Sometimes I just groan at the show. It is still the same trashy humor that it's always been. All the sex jokes and the, quite frankly, racist stereotypes. That was basically what the show was known for. But yeah, I'm watching it. The other thing is, last month, or at the end of August, I picked up a DVD set at Walmart for $20, which was a collection of the original, the first 8 Friday the 13th movies, the ones that were done by Paramount from 1981 to 1988. And the only reason I bought the set, because generally I don't care for those movies, but I've always said that I really, really like Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives,
mm-hmm.
because that was the one where up to that point Jason had essentially just been a regular human, just one who was very, very determined in his hobby. But then I think the 4th ends with Jason dying, and then the 5th was them trying to relaunch the franchise with a new killer, but the fans hated that film. So with this one, they brought back Jason, and the way they bring back Jason in this one is a guy digs up his grave, and lightning bolts strike the grave and bring him back to life. This is basically the film where they say, yeah, forget all that. He's a monster. He's a golem. The thing is, this is also the film where they really introduced a lot of humor into it.
Okay.
A lot of meta comedy, and it just makes the film much more entertaining and fun to me. I think it's actually one of the more highly, I don't want to say acclaimed, because it's a Friday the 13th movie. Even at best, they're not really acclaimed, but it was one of the most well-reviewed films in the entire franchise. Of like, I don't know, what, 14 film? No, that's too many. There's the original 8, and there's the 3 they did with New Line, 11, and then the remake, that's 12. Okay, so 12 films. But yeah, it's a fun, it's goofy, it's entertaining. The thing I really like about it is the director has said that a large part of his inspiration for making this film was the Universal Monsters movies, particularly Frankenstein, which is where you get the idea of him being revived from lightning.
Mm-hmm.
So my sister asked to borrow the set, and I lent it to her, and I had accidentally said that the one that I liked was the 5th, so she ended up watching the 5th, and she said, this is nothing like what you said. I go, I realized I made a mistake. So this morning, when she finished the 5th, she was starting the 6th, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to watch it with her.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up watching the movie with her. I think we started at like 10 to 6 this morning. Cause, I hadn't been into bed or anything, so I just figured, what the heck, watch a trashy horror movie, at the crack of dawn. So yeah, that said, 8 movies. I only watched number 6, but I'm actually thinking once I finish the Two Broke Girls set, I might quickly try to get through and watch the entire Friday the 13th collection. But yeah, that's basically it for me. That's what I've been doing this week.
Okay, well, I've done a little bit more than that because I managed to read some comics. And there's only 2 that I'm really going to talk about okay, so I read Amazing Spider-Man 6, which was a lot of fun. I read Batman 56, which something major happened in Batman 55, and I didn't think I was going to be cool with it. But this story was fantastic because it was just one of those stories where it's just Batman and he doesn't stop. And you know how I love that. Marvel is putting out all these anniversary special versions of like new What Ifs because it's like the anniversary of What If. So they did a What If Flash Thompson with Spider-Man that was really good. I think without giving too much away, I had mentioned it to you and you were like, well, if Flash Thompson was Spider-Man, it should go this way, but they probably won't do it that way. And then I read it and they did do it that way. And Tony Stark Iron Man number 3, which I think I talked really strongly about the first 2, and I really liked them. I just had put off reading number 3, and it was more good fun from Slott. The 2 big ones were Heroes in Crisis number 1 and Doomsday Clock number 7. Now, Heroes in Crisis has been very divisive online.
To say the least.
To say the least, and I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it. I know that going into it, everything I heard about it didn't interest me. Other than the fact that I really love Tom King. Now, here's another thing. As a retailer, occasionally we get previews of books. So, about a month ago, we had gotten, like, the first 12 pages of Heroes in Crisis. So I had kind of knew the beginning of the book. Because I did go through that.
My goodness, you never mentioned this to me before.
I did not. So we also got an art only no dialogue version of Batman Damned like a month ago. So
Did it have nudity?
You know what? We don't know because we weren't looking for it, and then Jeremy doesn't remember where he put it. So
I would be looking for that.
Yeah, it's around somewhere. A lot of times they're just PDFs they send us though. So I've been struggling with this at work because I don't know how to give an elevator pitch to this series. the best I can tell you is there is a thing in the DC universe called the Sanctuary, which is a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere run by Kryptonian robots that were supposed to be programmed to have the best traits of the Trinity. And it's a place for heroes to go when they're suffering any sort of mental trauma from being heroes.
It's essentially a superhero rehabilitation center.
Kind of. It's Tom King conceived the idea after having a anxiety attack. He also, most people don't know this. I didn't know this until recently. He is a former FBI agent, and
CIA.
CIA? I thought it was FBI.
Yeah.
No, you're right. So, but he had, experienced things like this while he was in the agency. So he thought, well, if they have a counseling thing for agents when they see things that are horrifying, there would have to be something like that for heroes. It's a decent idea. What does Tom King do that I really, really like? Dialogue. And the dialogue between Booster Gold and Harley Quinn in this issue it's fantastic. The fight scene between Booster Gold and Harley Quinn in this issue are fantastic. There's a bunch of deaths in the book, and a lot of people are upset about them. And I know the book's been out for a week, but I'm not going to get into what they are, but one of them really, really bothers me. Now, part of the reason it bothers me is it's not shocking in any way, shape, or form. The way the deaths are presented, they're just there and they're just dead. We don't get to see them get killed. Now, I get it. It's a murder mystery. That's part of the situation. But it's just like, they killed them? And one of them was a character that not only just recently had come back to the DC Universe, but had recently come back to the DC Universe in a big, important way. And then they just kind of die off screen in this. The thing that I keep coming up with on this story is I don't know what the point of it is. Like, it was a pointless story to me. I feel like if they had established the Sanctuary for the last 6 to 8 months in other DC comics, instead of saying, here's this thing that is, and then something happens.
Yeah.
Like, make us care about it going in.
Mm-hmm. I just want to make the quick point. Apparently, the Sanctuary was name-dropped in at least 2 Tom King comics in the last half year.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
In very, very quick passing. That is not the same as developing this. See, the thing that gets me with this miniseries is that this is a brilliant concept. It's a great idea. It's just it seems like to me that Tom King is trying to do something that is quote unquote important, something that kind of issues that should be addressed in modern superhero comics, but it's getting marred in cheap sensationalism and cheap deaths.
Well, so
and cheap shock.
A lot of people's comments have been, oh, well, these deaths don't mean anything because they're just going to come back. Especially since this one person had just come back,
Right.
And then, so what does DC do to respond to that? They have Tom King go out and say, oh, no, they won't be reversed. No writer can say the death of any character won't be reversed.
No.
Grant Morrison conceived of and created Damian Wayne with a finite story in mind and took him from his creation to his death, then left the book, and his death was very much meant to be permanent, then left the book, and scant months later, Damian Wayne was back and is a major part of the DC Universe. No writer has complete control over whether a character stays dead.
No, not unless it's a creator-owned comic. If someone next week went to Marvel and pitched a brilliant idea for bringing Uncle Ben back, it would totally happen. No one ever thought in their right mind that Bucky Barnes would ever come back and be important, and then he did.
Yeah, no one ever thought Jason Todd would come back, and he did.
No.
So
death in superhero comics is broken for all time.
But, okay, so all of that said, I'm not going to put it completely past Tom King that he's going to pull a Grant Morrison here. Now, Grant Morrison, I have said, is one of my favorite writers. I have a history with Grant Morrison where when he starts a storyline, he makes me incredibly angry. And I say, what are you doing, Grant? This is not what I want to read. And then I end up really, really liking the story. So I'm not going to put it past Tom King that he can't do that. because it's been done before to me. So, I mean, All-Star Superman, which we discussed on this show, my all-time favorite Superman story, I hated the first issue when I read it. I hated it.
Yeah, I was not really a fan of the first issue either.
I hated the setup for Batman R.I.P. Both of those stories by Grant Morrison, I love. My all-time favorite Superman story, and probably a top 10 Batman story for me. But I hated the first issues and the introductions on both of those. Because Grant Morrison has the thing, and you hear creators talk about this, or showrunners or whatever talk about this, and sometimes people take it the wrong way or take offense from it. But Grant Morrison has the thing where you, as a fan, might not necessarily know what you want, but he knows what you want, and he's going to give it to you. And that's what All-Star Superman did, But the way he got there was not the way you expected him to get there, and the introduction to the series, where it's like, the thing everyone says about Superman is you can't write an interesting Superman story because he's too powerful. And what's the first thing Grant does in that storyline is triple his power.
Yeah.
Now, in the end, it ends up being the point. He tripled his power and still wrote a super interesting human story with Superman. So you can write an interesting Superman story despite his high level of power. But when I read that first issue, I'm sitting there going, really? You're going to triple his power? What the heck?
Yeah, that wasn't really my issue with the first issue of All-Star Superman.
Really?
No, my thing was that I was off-put by the idea that Superman would be dying.
I could totally see that.
And I thought that the narrative in the first issue was confusing. I did not dislike it, but I wasn't completely sold on it. It wasn't really until the second issue where I started going, I'm starting to get the feel for this.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, Batman R.I.P. was the same way. I've heard people say that Son of Batman was the same way. Like, they gave Batman a son, and he's, a killer from the League of Assassins. This is I don't want this, and then you get Damian out of it.
Yeah, Son of Batman came out, and the thing that I kept hearing from people was how much they hated Damian.
Yeah.
That Damian was just completely unlikable and irredeemable. And they could not imagine or understand how Grant Morrison thought that this was a good idea. And then he ends up becoming I don't want to say universally beloved, but really, really well-loved character.
He's a super popular character now. So to follow that up, I then read Doomsday Clock #7, which is just like pure comics perfection. Doomsday Clock continues to be the amazing sequel to Watchmen I didn't know that I wanted, and Jeff Johns, some of his best work. And I said this last week when the book came out. If Jeff Johns never does anything good in comics again beyond creating the Mime and the Marionette for this series, his legacy is fine. Like, I know all the great stuff Jeff Johns has done in comics. I know he's getting ready to write Shazam and the Three Jokers and all this other stuff coming up. So he's probably going to do more amazing things. He wrote DC Rebirth, which was my favorite comic of the last 10 years. It made me cry out, openly cry. Still, the Mime and the Marionette are such great characters. The world is so much better for having these two characters in it.
Yeah, this is a series that I have issue 1, and I have been really wanting to read along and collect this series. I have yet to find any of the other issues in my area, at my local comic shops. I can never find the comic, period.
Well, they might be under ordering, and it might just be selling out, because it's doing very well for us. Even now, not only, it was monthly, and then it went to bi-monthly, and we're at the 7th issue, I think the 5th issue that's been bi-monthly, and the numbers are still super strong on it.
Yeah, my only issue with this, and again, I have only read the first issue, is that this was largely sold as a Superman miniseries, and I have not heard Superman's name really mentioned at all since the first issue, the very final teaser with him waking up from a nightmare.
He showed up 2 issues ago, because I remember making note of the fact that they must have done the art recently because he was wearing the Bendis costume.
Well, whenever the series launched, they said that it was going to take place over the period of the year, and
Right, but the cover of the first issue, he's in the Reborn costume.
right.
And when he finally showed up, he's in the Bendis costume. So there's that, and then he was shown again in this issue, and Dr. Manhattan came back in this issue. And yes, I understand what you're saying, because this series was largely sold to us, and then we in turn sold it to our customers as Superman versus Dr. Manhattan. And we are now through 7 issues, and it looks like that might be a thing that happens in the future of the series. And what, there's five left?
Right. I wouldn't expect it to be 12 issues of Superman versus Dr. Manhattan, but I thought Superman was going to be the main character of the DCU in the entire story, because that is what it was sold as.
Right. There really hasn't been a main character from the DCU side. It's been mostly focused on the Watchmen characters. Yes, the Watchmen characters interacting with the DC characters as they're here in the DC universe. But it's like Batman's there and the Joker's there, but it's Rorschach and the Mime and the Marionette and Ozymandias' story so far. So I'll give you a tease without getting into everything that happens in the issue. You know how Dr. Manhattan can see all points in time at once?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, really quick, they do establish that Dr. Manhattan was the one that created the New 52 and the DC Rebirth, as you know, so the new Earth that the DC Comics exist on since the New 52 started. So
that
are the result of Dr. Manhattan.
Right, that theory is no longer a theory.
Right, it is explicitly stated by Manhattan what he did, how it changed things, and why things are different. But the other thing is, you like I said, there's the thing with Manhattan being able to see all points in time at once. The issue ends, and yeah, this is kind of giving away a lot, but there's so much leading up to it, and I won't get into it. The issue ends with Manhattan saying in a week's time he'll meet Superman, and he can't see anything beyond that. And the implications of that are mind-boggling.
That is such a cool idea.
I mean, he even says, like, does Superman kill me? Do I do something that destroys the entire universe? What happens? I don't know what happens. All I know is I meet Superman, and I can't see anything past that.
I guess at this point I'm just trade waiting, because I really do want to read this book.
So also this week, a miniatures board game called Monster Apocalypse came out. This is a second edition recreation of a game that had come out originally back in, I want to say, 2008. It used to be a pre-painted miniature random packed type game like HeroClix. They scrapped that. They largely kept the rules the same, but they are releasing figure packs, and you know what you're getting, and they made it more of a hobbyist type game, so you have to actually put the figures together and paint them yourself. So they changed sort of the level of what type of game it is there. Still, it's what it is it's giant monsters, it's kaiju fighting in a city, and I played it at the Alliance Open House. It's really fun. I ended up picking up like basically the 2 starter sets that came in. There's one for the good guys and one for the bad guys, and so I basically bought the store out when our supply came in. I'm looking forward to playing it. I've been reading the rules and putting the figures together, and I mostly have the Planet Eater Gorgadra painted. He's got his base coats and his washes on, and I just got to go in and do the final detail work on him. So looking forward to playing that. Watched a few other movies without Derek. One of them, the Rankin Bass Halloween-themed Mad Monster Party, and for some reason there's a question mark in that, because that's how that title plays out, which stars Boris Karloff as Professor Baron von Frankenstein, who is going to retire from being the head of the League of Monsters, but he's also going to reveal his new greatest creation that he's come up with, and he calls all the monsters to his island, as well as his little nebbish pharmacist nephew to the island, and he intends to give the secrets that he's come up with to his nephew and have him be the new head of the League of Monsters. And goofiness ensues in the typical stop-motion Rankin Bass way. It's basically Rankin Bass doing the Universal Monsters without the rights to do so, and changing a lot of names and changing a lot of appearances, but it's It's certainly not Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but it's a strong outing from them, and the monsters are really cool looking. It's a lot of the guys from Mad Magazine did the art design for the monsters. And you got Karloff, again, associated with the Frankenstein property.
Yeah, this is one of the Rankin Bass, films that I've never seen. I've been interested in this one for, since I was a kid, but I've never gotten the chance. It's been available on DVD and Blu-ray, but I've never been able to find them within an affordable price that is not used.
Yeah, I got it on Blu-ray a couple of years ago. I got the Anchor Bay release.
Well, that's the thing is, every time I find them on like Amazon, it's third party, and they're usually very expensive. And it's like, do I really want to spend 20, 25, 30 bucks on this for Blu-ray? And it's like, I'm not really sure. 10, 15, I definitely. But
yeah, I spent probably 15 on it. So I would go with that. I would not drop 30, 40 bucks on it, but it's still a fun watch.
No, eventually I hope I will be able to finally get it.
I watched the Tim Burton Johnny Depp version of Dark Shadows this afternoon. Another one I like to watch at Halloween.
I would have watched that if I had known.
Well, you weren't on, and I was trying to get through films.
I like that movie.
Yeah, so do I. I think that movie gets a bad rap. Mind you, I watched the original Dark Shadows growing up. I watched the 90s remake. So I understand people going, oh, well, it's too funny and it's not like the original. But it's like, I say about the comic book films all the time, like, it's another version of the thing. It doesn't invalidate the previous version. It doesn't replace the previous version. It's another take, and it's an enjoyable take. Depp, I think, is hilarious in the film. I like all the 70s stuff. I really like Michelle Pfeiffer in the film.
It's got such a great cast.
Yeah, it's got an amazing cast. And it's largely a lot of fun, and it doesn't take itself seriously, and I really wish that it had gotten a sequel, because there is a blatant sequel set up at the ending, but yeah, I like that film quite a bit. I've got so many other Tim Burton films to watch before Halloween, and that was just one of the ones I wanted to get in. Finally, the big one, I went to see Venom.
Oh boy.
Now, let me quickly hit you with some truths, some fact here on Venom. Opened with $80 million. It broke the October record by almost $20 million. Average audience score right now is a B+. That's in line with Ant-Man and the Wasp and Justice League. It beat out Ant-Man and the Wasp's opening of $75 million. This is all from Box Office Mojo. So the question is, was it a good movie? It wasn't the terrible train wreck I thought it was going to be, is how I'll start with this. It's largely a... What did I say? It's the weirdest version of The Mask that I ever saw?
Yeah, that is what you told me.
And a friend of mine told me that it was like a stale potato chip. It has the taste, but there's something that just quite not right about it. It's not a good film, but I can see where audiences would like it. I think audiences are going to be comparing it to Deadpool. I say that because they really tried to make it a comedic action, slightly horror, slightly adult themed, even though it was only PG-13 type film. They went for that direction. What suffers is the character of Venom, who is largely unrecognizable in this movie. You have Tom Hardy trying to give a good performance. You have, what's her name? Michelle Williams?
Mm-hmm.
Giving a terrible performance in the film. And you have, what's the other actor's name? The villain.
I can't think of his name.
He was in Rogue One. Riz Ahmed. You have him giving a terrible performance in the film. And I know and I understand that Riz Ahmed is a good actor, and I understand that Williams is also a good actress. And so I'm going to guess that it's largely because of the direction. Now, I saw someone on Flickcharter saying it was like a Cronenberg film. I was amazed at how good it was.
Oh gosh.
So I said, people are gonna like this. The high school jocks that were in front of me in the theater thought everything that Venom said was hilarious. I can see people coming away from the movie with that reaction. But where it falls apart for me, and I think for most probably hardcore or dedicated comic fans, specifically Venom fans, is they took everything I like about the character out of the character. He's largely unrecognizable. Because the first 40 minutes to an hour of the movie, which you don't see Venom until the first hour is in, and it's how long is the movie? 112 minutes, so it's, basically a 2-hour movie, and you don't see him until the first hour. But the first hour of the movie is them trying to do what Eddie Brock does in the comic, which is become a disgraced reporter. But they want him to do it in a way where they can redeem him and he can still be a hero because he's the hero of this movie, rather than just end up being a scumbag who's trying to kill Peter Parker, which is what he is in the comics, And then also trying to introduce the symbiotes without using Spider-Man. So in the comic, it's the perfect union of Brock and the symbiote because they both hate Peter. There's none of that here. There's no reason why they should be together, And then it's Venom talking in Brock's head for most of the movie, making mostly lame jokes. Some of them are funny. There are parts that are genuinely funny. But as my friend Jeremy said, why am I laughing? It's a Venom film. Why is this the tone they chose to go with? It just doesn't fit what you would expect from Venom. There's also problems of Venom fighting the other symbiote villain at the end, Riot, I think is his name. And it's dark out, and Venom's black, and Riot's gray, and they're they've got these tendrils and everything. So it's really hard to tell who's who and who's doing what throughout that sequence, which is the big main ending fight. There's not really a good standalone fight or action scene with Venom throughout the film. There's some decent character stuff. There's some good stuff from Hardy, but overall, I would give this a C-. It's not terrible, but man, it could have been so much better. I guess if we're going on our usual star ratings that we give things when we review it here, I would give it a 2. The mid-credits scene, which is a minute and a half, best thing in the movie. And then there is a preview for Into the Spider-Verse that is a 5-minute scene from the film that plays at the end of the credits. And you know what? Go see Venom to see that scene, because that movie looks great. But Venom itself, it's not terrible like Fantastic Four and The Predator and some other films, but it's a whole lot of kind of nothing. I still didn't like his voice. I still didn't. It just wasn't Venom. It just wasn't the character from the comics, really, in any way, shape, or form.
Well, the thing is, was anyone really expecting it to be very much like the comic book version of the character, whenever they largely do not have access to Spider-Man?
Well, no, but is there not a difference between your expectations and your wants? My expectation was the movie was going to be terrible, and it wasn't. And I knew they weren't going to have access to Spider-Man. And to me, Venom is at his best when he's fighting Spider-Man. And they weren't doing that, So I knew it was going to be weird. But it was just so, watching them try to create a backstory for him that was the same as the comic without being the same as the comic because of so much that they couldn't use. The movie seemed hamstrung from the very beginning.
Yeah, doing it that way kind of makes me think of trying to do the Catwoman movie where you can't use Batman. So you have to basically invent wholesale for the character.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's just weird. Did we talk about, did you bring up what Tom Hardy said for the character?
I'm going to let you say it.
Okay, so Matt sees this movie, what was it, Thursday night?
Yeah, I saw it Thursday night on the preview showing.
Thursday night, you get out of the theater and you go, get on Skype. You asked me to get on Skype. So I get on Skype, and you're talking about the movie. And as you're describing it to me, and we're talking about the cast, we're talking about the actors, blah, 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 I go to Wikipedia, and I'm looking through it, and I'm looking through the actors, the cast list, and they have a description of the characters in that. And under the Tom Hardy section, I start laughing. I'm going, oh my goodness. So I end up sharing it with you, and I don't have it in front of me, but basically Tom Hardy said that when he was doing, making the film, he essentially was doing with Eddie Brock and Venom as the two separate characters, that he was essentially doing it as Ren and Stimpy.
And I said, that's very accurate. That's the movie I just saw.
You were alarmed. You actually said, oh my god, that is exactly what that movie was. Yeah, so I guess Eddie Brock is Stimpy and Venom is Ren. And that is just amazing to me. That's your major superhero movie, Ren and Stimpy. I mean, wow. And I just think it's sad. You have Michelle Williams, who is one of the most acclaimed actresses of the last 10 years, if not longer. And as you said, she's terrible in the movie.
I thought she was horribly wooden.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem with the direction.
The other thing, sort of the overall problem with the movie, like even let's not talk about how like or dislike to the comic it is. Let's just take the movie on its own merits. Mm-hmm. The movie on its own merits, like I was ahead of it constantly. Like it was totally the type of movie where I'm going, this is the part where this person says this, and then I'd sit there and watch it happen. Like nothing in the movie was a surprise. It was completely predictable throughout. That doesn't make it.
It also sounds unchallenging.
Right. That doesn't make it horrible, but it doesn't make. There was no twist. There was nothing that made me go, I didn't see that coming, or wow, that was great. That really amazed me. It was entirely just, okay. This is the scene where this happens.
Right.
Okay, I expect this to happen. Okay, there's a couple of gags, jokes that take you a little bit by surprise, but nothing plot wise.
Right. Your point is it wasn't challenging. It was largely by the numbers, I'm assuming, and it wasn't clever, and it didn't really do anything new with the genre.
No, it totally didn't. So yeah, that was the thing. Like I said, didn't hate it, but can't really recommend it other than for the Spider-Verse thing.
Okay, I have a question for you. You are a pretty big Spider-Man fan.
Yeah.
Are you going to buy this on home video?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that. I don't really think I need to see it again. Now, if I get in the next 3 months the itch to go, maybe it'll be better the second time, because I'm totally down for that theory. I do that all the time.
It happens.
It happens, So if I get that itch, maybe I'll Redbox it. Maybe I'll buy it when it's cheaper. Like Solo was a case where I knew it wasn't a bad film, so I always intended to buy it. But then when I did buy it, I found that I enjoyed it so much more the second time. If I do buy it, I can't see me buying it day one.
Oh gosh, no.
So I'll wait till it goes down.
Might be one to wait for it to hit the $8 bin.
Yeah, something like that. So, yeah, I mean, and Venom's a weird character for me because I think he's one of the best Spider-Man villains, but I also feel like he's largely been ruined by the Venom fanboys. Like let him be a villain. Why has he had so many series where they try to make him an anti-hero and try to make him a good guy and everything? And to me, that never works for him. I just want him to be the guy who hates Spider-Man and then the suit that hates Spider-Man, and the two of them together are one of Spider-Man's toughest foes. That's all I need out of the character. So that was what I did, and I guess we will move on to the news. The news quickly. We only have a few stories, even though 2 weeks have gone by. Let's. I'm gonna do them in a different order than you got them written down here. So, quickly, Deadpool number 5, I believe it was, has a Garbage Pail Kid inspired cover, and all of a sudden the book is, I don't want to say going through the roof, but it's increased in price more than what was expected immediately after its release, because supposedly Marvel didn't have any sort of legal rights to use the Garbage Pail Kid style. I don't know how this isn't considered a parody, but
Yeah, okay. The thing with the story is, I think this is being driven by speculators. I don't think there's any truth to any of the rumors going around with this, that they're going to pull the cover. I mean, it's a variant cover.
No, it's not. It's the main cover.
It's not? It's the main cover?
Yeah.
There's no way it does not qualify under parody, because it is flat out a parody. I've seen it. There is no Garbage Pail logo on it. The logo vaguely looks Garbage Pail like. If I did not know what it was supposed to be, I would have just assumed it was like some kind of like Marvel Zombies or Simon Bisley type cover art horror thing.
Right.
I wouldn't have guessed it. So I think this is people blowing something, making something out of gossamer, out of something that doesn't actually exist. I frankly, I think this is nuts. It doesn't make any sense to me, because
I didn't get that it was supposed to be Garbage Pail Kids until I read about the issue going up in value. It is currently selling for approximately $15, and that was the case since Wednesday when it was released.
Yeah, I kind of see this as a joke. It doesn't make any sense to me that there would be like any real controversy over it. It's like, part of me wonders if this has something to do with the Batman controversy.
Yeah, because it's so close.
Right, because it's immediately after that, and all of a sudden you have a Marvel book where they're going, see, Marvel has controversy, and I don't know, is this someone at Marvel the publicity department trying to drum up some buzz or something to try to get some headlines away from the Batwang?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because this seems completely made up. It qualifies under parody, and it's barely recognizable as the thing it's supposed to be parodying. And it uses none of the logos. So I can't imagine whoever owns the rights to the Garbage Pail Kids would have seen that cover and freaked out and said, they're stealing from us. It doesn't even look like the same art style, which is a shame. Because whenever I heard about it, I thought, oh my goodness, we're gonna have Deadpool with the dimples and the big Cabbage Patch Kid heads. I mean, it's nuts. We're talking about it being accused of infringing on the rights of it's a parody infringing on the rights of a parody infringing on the rights of something else.
Right.
It's insane. The whole thing sounds like it's like some elaborate joke.
It's not that I don't know. Maybe I should try selling my issue for $15. That's all I know. I haven't even read it yet. It went straight in the bag and board. So.
Yeah, to me it sounds like someone accidentally bought a few copies and said, oh, I gotta figure out a way to sell these. And then just made up a story.
All right, we got a teaser for the Harley Quinn animated series that will appear on DC's streaming service. It's just called DC Universe, right? The streaming service?
I believe so.
This looks fun. This looks fun to me, and what's his name coming back to play Batman?
Dietrich Bader.
Yeah, Dietrich Bader coming back to play Batman in a more, I'm not going to say more serious, but probably more adult series.
It does not look serious.
No, it does not look serious at all. What our friend Malcolm said that Poison Ivy seemed like Daria.
That is one of the more consistent things I've been seeing for this trailer. People saying that it's Green Daria.
Yeah, basically the trailer is Harley, and she's super excited, and she's gonna have the show. And Poison Ivy's kind of like, whatever, man. Why are we doing this?
They're gonna hate it.
Yeah.
They hate everything. Yeah, she's 100% Daria.
Shouldn't we be doing a show that's like all dark and depressing? Like, isn't that the DC way now? And Harley's like, that is a very good and accurate way to do things, but that's not what we're doing. We're gonna have fun.
Okay, I have two things I want to say about this. The first is Harley is voiced by Kaylee Cuoco from The Big Bang Theory in this, and she does not sound in any way like traditional Harley. She doesn't sound at all like Arlene Sorkin.
Right.
And I don't mind. I thought when I watched the trailer, I was actually surprised at how much I ended up liking how she was voicing the character, because she does not sound like Penny from The Big Bang Theory. And while she doesn't sound like Arlene Sorkin or anyone else that has voiced Harley since, she has the right amount of energy and excitement and exuberance, and to me that was enough. I actually liked how she sounded as the character, and that alone made me kind of interested in the show.
It's sort of weird to me that it's another person from Big Bang Theory voicing Harley.
Oh yeah,
after Batman Harley Quinn last year.
Yeah, that was Melissa Roche.
Yeah, who actually I liked how she did it. So I'm not down on that film the way a lot of people are. But
I'm not. I'm not as down on The Big Bang Theory as a lot of people. It's not one of my favorite shows, though.
It's terrible.
But Melissa Roche is my favorite on the show.
I like people on the show. I'm just saying the show I don't like. So.
Right. I'm just saying. Kaylee Cuoco, she sounded great. She does not sound like what I expect Harley to sound like, but the energy and everything is all there.
You got Lake Bell as Poison Ivy, you got Diedrich Bader as Batman, and then in unspecified roles you have Alan Tudyk, Ron Funches, J.B. Smoove, Jason Alexander, Wanda Sykes, Giancarlo Esposito. I'm gonna assume she's playing. No, I won't say it.
Wait a second. Alan Tudyk and Ron
Funches.
Is this a mini reunion?
Yeah, it's like a bunch of guys from Powerless, right?
Oh my gosh! These are the two. Yeah, I mean, they were both great on Powerless.
Natalie Morales. Okay, so maybe she's playing.
We're talking about Renee.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was trying not to name drop Renee Montoya, but because I just like, I mean, I'm sorry. When you get a Latin woman in a Batman project, you're gonna assume they're playing Renee Montoya. Jim Rash, Tony Hale, and Christopher Maloney are all confirmed in the cast.
Oh my god, Christopher Maloney, jeez. Jennifer Esposito is an actress I used to have a major thing for years ago. I haven't seen her in a long time. That's kind of fun.
So yeah, that trailer was I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like the trailer. The second thing I wanted to bring about this is I have been seeing. I'm seeing people who are saying how great the show looks and how great the trailer is, but you inevitably, because it's DC, you have people complaining that they're trying to turn Harley into Deadpool, and that has been the big criticism that I've seen of this trailer. And
I don't really see it.
Hasn't Harley always been like this?
Yeah.
Ever since she debuted in the comics, after being on the animated series, her 90s Harley series was this type of humor.
I think so.
Yeah, it does not seem all that removed from what we usually see for the character.
But we're also living in a world where I had to have people tell me this week that they couldn't believe that the Spider-Verse movie was going to have Spider-Pig from the Simpsons movie.
Oh, gosh.
It's friggin' Peter Porker. He's been around forever. A friend of mine at work just got his first appearance.
Oh, Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, was one of the first comic books I was regularly collecting back when I was... God, what year did it debut? 83?
First appearance, Marvel Tales #1, November 1983.
Yeah, so I would have been 6 or 7 whenever that happened. Yeah, that's a 35-year-old comic. Oh gosh, no, it's just all of a sudden Deadpool finds success in the movies, and the next thing you know is, Deadpool was the first R-rated comic book movie, which it was not. There were like at least a dozen before it, with 20 years before it.
Right.
And it's the first funny comic book. No, it's not. First funny comic book movie. No, it's not. Oh, it parodies superheroes. That's never been done before. Batman 66.
Right.
Kick-Ass.
So many others. You know the funny...
Mystery Men.
Mystery Men. Oh, Mystery Men's such a good film.
I haven't watched that in so long.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I really like that movie.
That was but people forget that was an adaptation of the Flaming Comet.
Flaming Carrot.
Flaming Carrot comics. I combined carrot and comet into one word.
You know the thing that people don't realize about the Spectacular Spider-Ham? He is a spider that was bitten by a radioactive pig, not the other way around.
I always forget that.
He was a spider named Peter who lived in the basement of a scientist named May Porker, who was a pig, who accidentally irradiated herself with the world's first atomic-powered hairdryer, and then in a fit of confusion, bit Peter, and he found himself transformed into an anthropomorphic pig with spider powers. So he is not a pig bitten by a radioactive spider. He is a spider bitten by a radioactive pig.
Comic books.
That's the genius of Tom DeFalco.
Oh.
Yet his name is still Peter Benjamin Porker.
Peter Porker? Yeah, he was Peter Porker before he was actually part pig.
Well, it says when he was a spider, he was just simply called Peter. So.
Oh my goodness. They released a trade paperback collection of the first several issues. It was not digest size, but it was about midway between a digest and regular comic book size. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. I bought that for myself because I wanted to read it because I was such a fan of the comics when I was a little kid. But I never actually got around to reading it because I ended up instead turning it into, I think, the Christmas or birthday gift for my nephew. So, I mean, I never even broke the spine on the thing.
Right.
I bought it, and my sister, mentioned, we're going to have to figure out something to get for my nephew Max. And I thought, you know what, I'll give him the book. I have no idea if he has ever read that. I hope he did. I hope he liked it. Because, man, it was a fun comic when I was young.
I'm looking at other characters that exist in the same Earth as Peter Porker. Did you realize that there's a Spider-Ham 2099 and his name is Pigel O'Malley? There are two versions of Mary Jane. There's Mary Jane Water Buffalo, and there's Mary Crane Watson. There's J. Jonah Jackal. There's two versions of Betty Brant. Batty Brant and Betty Branteater. There's Flash Tomcat. There's Liz Alleycat. There's Awful Flight instead of Alpha Flight. How did we start talking about Spider-Ham?
It's weird. Here's one thing I kind of always wondered. Was Peter Porker created because of the success of Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew? Because they had their own series at this point, I believe.
I feel like Zoo Crew was earlier, but no,
that's what I'm saying.
He first appeared in a one-shot humor comic book Marvel tale starring Peter Porker's Spectacular Spider-Ham #1, which was then followed by an ongoing bi-monthly series under Marvel's Star Comics imprint, which was that was when Marvel was doing Star Comics, and that was their kids line.
But no, I believe up to this point, Peter Porker debuts in 1983, and I believe before this, Zoo Crew already had its own comic book. I think it might have even still have been on the stands at the time. I'd have to check the dates, but I think so.
I don't know. It doesn't say anything about that here, so.
Well, they're not going to say, "Geez, DC's having success with that. Let's do our own."
No, Wikipedia would say that.
Maybe.
Wikipedia would say, "Oh, this was created because it was an answer to this." They do that all the time.
X-Men totally ripped off Doom Patrol. Shh.
All right, moving on from this Harley Quinn story where we've talked about nothing but Spider-Ham. Jon Favreau's Star Wars TV series is going to be The Mandalorian, and it looks like it's basically a Mandalorian Western.
Yeah, he released a plot synopsis of a sort on his Twitter. It says, "The Mandalorian, after the stories of Jango and Boba Fett, another warrior emerges in the Star Wars universe. The Mandalorian is set after the fall of the Empire and before the emergence of the First Order. We follow the travails, that's a weird choice of word, of a lone gunfighter in the outer reaches of the galaxy, far from the authority of the New Republic." And, we also got a picture released for it. And, you know what? Yeah, I'm fine with this.
It looks cool.
Yeah, the idea is... Okay, I'm looking at the picture of the outfit of the guy. And yeah, it's very much kind of a cross between Django and Boba Fett, but kind of more streamlined, more stripped down. But man, I am getting a really strong vibe from this of The Man with No Name.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that excites me.
Yeah, that I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, I'm sure there are probably people who are angry that it's not actually Boba Fett getting a series, but this actually might be the best idea. Give us a character that we have not seen before, a new character, someone that's kind of fresh, and this way we're kind of getting Boba Fett without actually getting Boba Fett, and we're getting someone who largely has carte blanche.
Mm.
So yeah, it's space western. I'm down for that.
I'm always down for a space western.
And it's Jon Favreau, and they've listed a few of the directors that are going to be doing episodes. I'm trying to track down who the names were. A couple of them were surprises, but I'm not seeing them on the articles I have. Oh, here we go. Series will be written and executive produced by Emmy-nominated producer and actor Jon Favreau, as previously announced, with Dave Filoni, Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, directing the first episode. Additional episodic directors include Deborah Chow of Jessica Jones, Rick, I'm going to attempt to pronounce this, Famuyiwa of Dope, Bryce Dallas Howard of Soulmates, and Taika Waititi of Thor Ragnarok. I didn't know Bryce Dallas Howard was doing directing now.
Well, it worked for Opie.
It did. It worked very well for him.
Maybe she'll discover that she'll follow the same path of being a terrible to mediocre actor, but a good director.
She's better than that. Oh gosh, you're mean.
I would have. You know what? I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed that you didn't defend Ron Howard before you defended her, because I insulted them both.
You talk about Opie Cunningham. That's a Saturday Night Live reference.
Yeah, I got it.
Eddie Murphy.
Finally, Netflix, Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. Producers promise that the new TV series will be pure puppetry. I don't know if I've ever seen Dark Crystal. If I did, it was when I was young.
I actually mentioned this a couple months ago whenever I watched it on demand.
Uh-huh.
Where I said I actually owned it on DVD, but I happened just to see that it was on the on-demand service free, so I ended up just watching it for the hell of it. Yeah, it was a movie I saw as a kid, and had a weird history with the film as a child. And then I saw it again as a teenager, and then as a young adult in my early 20s. But then I didn't see it again until I got it on DVD less than 10 years ago. Them doing this all puppetry, good. That's what the original show, the original film was. I would be disappointed if it was not all puppetry. They are stressing that they are going to be doing things a little bit differently, where a lot of the puppetry is going to be over green screen, so that they can. Well, if you see the original film, they had to hide all the puppeteers under sets and that. Because the sets would have been raised off the ground, and the puppeteers would have been under. Whereas this is with doing a green screen, you'd be able to have a little more freedom for the design for the puppets, where you wouldn't have to worry about hiding the puppeteers because they've just been wearing green, and then you just Photoshop them out, I guess. But yeah, that's fine. I'm assuming this means there's going to be quite a bit of CGI in the series, but what science fiction fantasy movie or TV show today doesn't?
No, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it seems like it's still going to be largely Henson production with the Henson kids producing, and yeah, everything about it makes it sound like they're doing the right thing. I mean, I like Dark Crystal. I've never been a huge Dark Crystal fan. Don't really consider myself part of the fandom, and that I always loved Labyrinth much more.
Right.
But yeah, I'm interested in this. If I get the opportunity, I might take a look at the show.
I'm more interested in what is the name of the show that what's her name is doing, the model Baker.
Oh!
I'm totally blanking on her name, even though I love her.
I don't know what's going on, but I just blanked too. I'm going to my Facebook because I posted about it a few days ago. Trying to find it. This is me scrolling through Facebook live on the podcast because I was unprepared for this. Oh, Mae Young Classic. That was another thing we watched.
Yeah, it wasn't very good.
I like some of it. Not the stuff that you like, though. The Curious Creations of Christine McConnell.
That's what it was, yes.
Also, I'm producing too much saliva. Yeah, I'm that is the Netflix show that I'm really looking forward to. Because, what did I write? Yeah, it's a macabre cooking show with black comedy and puppet monsters, and it looks like old Hollywood glamour meets Martha Stewart meets Tim Burton.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following Christine McConnell for 2 or 3 years now, since I first became aware of her, and it's like, she looks like a 1950s pinup model housewife baking confections based on Tim Burton movies. So there's nothing about that I don't like.
No.
And she's gonna do a show where she's also has puppets hanging out with her.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but after the trailer was released last week, I did see something saying that the puppets are being done by Henson.
That was my understanding.
And that makes me even more excited. That's the funny thing. We have an actual Henson franchise, one that was established when we were kids, that's getting a comeback. And I'm more excited about this cooking show. But the humor and everything in that is totally something I'm into. But yeah, I remember you and I discovered Christine McConnell at around the same time. I think it was on Flickr.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be a cooking show with Henson puppets. It's amazing.
And really black humor. I'm very much looking forward to that show.
Yeah. All right. So that's the news. Still haven't done the new ad, but I will tell you that a lot of people like the new layout. The store finally got the new layout we've been talking about. If you haven't seen it, come on in and check it out. Don't be surprised. Some people have been just straight up blown away by walking in and just seeing things be different. So come check it out. And we have the first order of the Galactic Greg's t-shirts on the way. So if you ordered one, they're going to be coming soon. They will be here in time. They'll be here this week. They'll be here in time for Walking Dead Day this Saturday, where you can get your copy of Galactic Greg's special cover for Walking Dead #1. So that's all the cool things happening there this week. We had a great response, a great turnout for our Magic, both pre-release and launch party for the new Guilds of Ravnica set. So the store's hopping. Come on in, check us out. 1407 East Lincoln Way in Valparaiso, Indiana. And we will move on now to the main topic. And the main topic that we have chosen for this first week of Halloween show is our top 5 favorite movie monsters. Now, just as a sort of header to this, it doesn't mean only giant monsters. It doesn't mean only, vampires or whatever. We left this open to any type of thing that would qualify as a monster in any type of movie, whether it's a horror movie or a comedy movie or what have you. So, Derek, would you want to start with your honorable mentions?
This one was a bit tough because I'm certain I am going to forget monsters and creatures and things that I love. Might even ones that might have actually made my top 5, if not my number 1 place.
Mm-hmm.
And doing these top 5, they can be really tough for that because you always end up realizing later on that you forgot something.
Well, I'm surprised I expected us to have largely similar top 5s, and we don't have any overlap in our top 5s.
We don't? I thought we did. I am shocked. Well,
we have overlap in our honorable mentions into our top 5s, but...
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, getting to my honorable mentions. Again, I'm giving the caveat that I probably, no doubt, I'm forgetting a lot of characters that I would normally have on this list. And then ones where I left them off because I wasn't even sure if they would qualify or not. Because, does Robbie the Robot qualify? Because if not, he'd be my number 1. I don't know.
He's necessarily a monster, but I can make an argument. So,
Right. So Robbie the Robot is not in this. he's not even on my honorable mention, but I'm mentioning him right now because I love Robbie the Robot. My honorable mentions are Godzilla, King Ghidorah, the Wolfman, as played by Lon Chaney. From Star Wars franchise, I have Chewbacca, who probably would have been my top 5, but I felt weird kind of putting him on there because he's a good guy and he's a hero and he's not a quote-unquote monster. I have the Wampa, which was I think the Wampa is the earliest monster in a movie that really excited and amazed me, seeing Empire the Strikes Back when I was very, very young.
Empire the Strikes Back.
Oh my god, what, did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Invasion of the Empire of the Strikes Back Astro Monster. And then for Ray Harryhausen, I have Talos, the giant statue from Jason and the Argonauts. I also have the skeleton army from Jason and the Argonauts. And from my favorite Ray Harryhausen film, which is The Golden Voyage of Sinbad from 1973, I believe, is Shiva, the statue that comes to life. I believe that is my absolute favorite Ray Harryhausen stop-motion animation. And the final thing of my honorable mentions, I almost put The Blob from the 1986 remake of The Blob, but instead I added The Stuff from the movie The Stuff. I'm not necessarily saying it's the best movie. I'm not necessarily it's a great movie. I'm not saying it's really a great monster, but it is soft serve ice cream that has mind control properties, and it's a monster. I just think it's a brilliant concept. So yeah, those are my honorable mentions.
Okay, my honorable mentions. I made a little bit shorter list, I think, but as Derek said, this list I could be missing so many people, and I could rearrange all of these lists in so many different ways. So this is just what I went with on the spur of the moment.
Well, the thing with this top 5 is that it was tougher for me than, say, the top 5 favorite Star Wars characters or any of our comic book lists, because there's so many things I'm probably forgetting.
So I went with Frankenstein's monster, however you want to address it. Originally, portrayed by Karloff, but there's been other versions that I really enjoy, but Karloff's the main version. King Kong, of course, the original version is the main one, but I like a lot of King Kong stuff. I put the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, both the animated and live versions, of the Disney. The Wolfman, really at this point I could say any of the big Universal monster movies, or Universal monsters I like, but yeah, the Wolfman's in there. And to get on one from Star Wars as well, I put the Rancor, because I always thought that was like the closest thing to, almost like the closest thing to a dragon in Star Wars when I was a kid, and I always loved just the whole pit fight aspect of Luke having to fight that thing. So those are my honorable mentions. And Derek, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is that big, beautiful, full-bodied female Mothra. I'm waiting for your response to that.
I was eating honey. I'm starting with a sore throat, so I was trying to get some honey down while you were talking.
That's fine. Yeah, Mothra. Mothra's my number 5. I'm actually surprised I didn't put her higher, but...
I'm surprised I didn't put her on my honorable mentions, because I love Mothra.
Oh, I have always said that Mothra was my favorite of the Japanese kaiju characters. Ever since I was a kid, I just love Mothra. Mothra was the pure good guy.
Mm-hmm.
You had Godzilla, who he was a villain. Maybe he's a good guy. Maybe he's an anti-hero. Who knows? Mothra was always good. I always loved Mothra. Pretty butterfly-looking moth who'd fly around and save the day, and she's got the little twin. I can never remember what they're called because they changed what they're called.
They changed what they're called from film to film.
Yeah, but the little twins singing the songs and all that, and Mothra is the protector of the universe and protector of the earth, and yeah, I just love Mothra. It's silly that you have a giant fuzzy moth that is this essentially Japanese superhero. I jokingly say comics, but Japanese kaiju. It's weird too, but I love it. One of the things that kind of held me back is that I'm not really sure how many Mothra films I've actually seen. I've seen a few. I've seen Mothra vs. Godzilla. I have Godzilla vs. Mothra, and I've seen her pop up in a couple of the other ones, such as Final Wars, and other things. But I don't know what it is. But ever since I was a kid, I don't know. Maybe it's the colors. Maybe it's that she kind of looked like a stuffed animal. But she just really appealed to me when I was a child. So Mothra is my number 5.
And copyrights be damned. Here we go. Well, I'll pause it there since Derek talked over it, but it's playing the Mothra song.
You could have edited it out.
No, I couldn't, because you were talking over the song.
I couldn't hear anything.
I know, but we've established this. When I play something on my laptop, it plays through the mic, and it gets recorded, so I thought you just would go with the flow, man.
I thought we were having technical difficulties.
No, I was playing the Mothra song from YouTube, so...
I'd like to stress that this was a parody. And it's protected.
Well, I didn't play the whole thing either, so...
Good. I don't have the money.
Blood from a stone. Alright. So going to my number 5. Well, I guess I should say that I also really love Mothra, and she's, for all the reasons you stated, she's the one pure good guy in the Godzilla universe, even when Godzilla's not a good guy. Also, she might have the most victories over Godzilla, because she tends to win whenever they come up against each other.
Oh yeah, she kicks his butt. I even bought you know what, I forgot it. I didn't even mention it, I have the Mothra trilogy from the 90s, although technically that's the son of Mothra.
The Mothra Leo.
Right.
So my number 5 is been mentioned on a previous list. I think it was our favorite fictional characters. He is Dracula. To me, going all the way back to Lugosi, because that was where I first saw him. But I mean, I like Lugosi. I like Frank Langella. I like Gary Oldman in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Probably my favorite version. I like Count Chocula. I like Count Von Count. I like the idea of this aristocratic guy in a cape who's a vampire. I love Dracula.
Talk about characters that are versatile. Dracula has to be top 5, if not number 1.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Dracula movies. I mean, he fought Billy the Kid.
He romanced Susan St. James.
That
would be the Dracula as played by George Hamilton.
Yes.
Man, I'd love to get that on DVD.
You also have, him in Monster Squad. He's great.
Yeah, I said it on the Monster Squad episode. I know it's going to be controversial, but I think Duncan Reiger might be my favorite Dracula.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. I would never say that, but he's also really good in it. So, my favorite Dracula is Bram Stoker's Dracula, so it's Gary Oldman. But
okay, the thing with Dracula is, again, I said he's extremely versatile.
Oh
character
yeah, absolutely.
Because you could do the parody stuff, you could do the light, goofy comedy stuff with like Count Von Count and Count Chocula, but then you could do something serious and dramatic and sexy with like Gary Oldman's version or Frank Langella's. But then the thing I love about the Duncan Reiger version is that in the Monster Squad, it is Dracula as a flat-out supervillain.
Yeah.
It is Dracula the closest we might ever get to the Tomb of Dracula Marvel Comics kind of supervillain version of the character. That's why I love that movie so much, and why I love the character portrayal in that film. I realize it's a goofy pick, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's still a viable pick. I mean, like he's really he's really good in that. Both the
sure
actor and the character are really good in that. So
I'm sure I'm not just saying it because Duncan Reiger's Canadian, but
yeah, that's Derek's motivation for everything. So
yes.
Yeah, to me, the main Universal monster, and that says a lot because like Frankenstein's got way better movies. The Wolfman might have better movies. The first Dracula movie is kind of and Lugosi only plays him one more time, but he's still such a power. Lugosi is such a powerful presence of the character that it makes it work. So
The Lugosi as Dracula is so iconic that his DNA, his fingerprints are all over that character till the end of time. Every single version is basically whether or not it's like Lugosi or how different it is from Lugosi.
Right.
Whereas Frankenstein, as iconic as the image of Karloff in that makeup is from the original film, the character is such a hodgepodge. It can go in almost any direction, and the Karloff version just does not have the same kind of oomph or shadow. It doesn't cast as long of a shadow as Lugosi's Dracula.
Yeah, all the way down to I don't say blah blah blah.
Yeah, Hotel Transylvania. It's all spoofing Lugosi. Also,
Dracula Untold, totally underrated film. I've mentioned it repeatedly when we've talked about like what they should be doing with Universal monster movies. Mm-hmm. That was a good start for a new Universal franchise that they didn't stick with.
Just another one of their half a dozen false starts.
Yeah. What is your number 4, Derek?
My number 4 is a relatively recent discovery for me because I never saw the original films growing up. I was aware of them mainly because I'd heard of them through Mystery Science Theater 3000, even though I never saw the actual episodes that had them. But I was aware of them when I was in high school, back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I can't remember, I think it was 3-4 years ago, I was at Sears, and I found the Blu-ray releases of the 1990s Gamera trilogy. And I bought them, and I watched them, and by God, I love them. And Gamera 1990s version, Guardian of the Universe, is my 4th favorite movie monster. In fact, I actually hesitated. I almost put him in my number 1. The only reason he's not my number 1 is because I decided to give a little more of a slack to the characters I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And because Gamera easily could be my number 1 because the final film, Gamera 3, Revenge of Iris, or however you want to pronounce it. I love that movie. It's one of my top 100 favorite films of all time, and I've only seen it a few times in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Gamera. We talk about Mothra as a superhero, and Gamera is definitely a superhero.
Oh yeah.
And I just love everything about the character in those movies. It more than anything, I think I mentioned this when I rewatched the movies a few months back, but I can really see the kind of almost like ground zero for what would eventually be the Zack Snyder Superman films.
Uh-huh.
In the 90s Gamera films, where you have Gamera as this monster, this alien type. Well, he's not literally an alien, but this like other that is dedicated to protecting the Earth, and he's constantly misunderstood by the people he's saving. And then the 3rd film is that people resent him because of the destruction that has happened in the wake of his protecting lives and protecting the world from alien invasions. And so you end up with humans that are trying to destroy him, which is just like something out of the sequels to Man of Steel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up with the character dying, sacrificing himself, but then he comes back for one more final battle, and it essentially ends up being about Gamera's never-ending battle. And I love 90s Gamera because 90s Gamera is Superman with a turtle shell.
So I grew up with Gamera as a kid. Like, I have a hard time remembering when I didn't know about Gamera, although I do remember discovering Gamera and going, wait, it's like Godzilla, but it's a turtle instead. And like already having been really familiar with Godzilla. Of course, that could have been 2 years apart for all I know because I was a kid. And then again, Mystery Science Theater, as you already mentioned, they did every one of the, they did 5 of the Showa series Gamera films. So, I'm being super familiar with it from that too, and I can never not think of the song from Mystery Science Theater.
I heard that so many times from you that whenever I think Gamera, that pops in my head.
You have to.
And I've never even seen the episodes with him.
Gamera is really neat. He is filled with turtle meat. We've been eating Gamera. You know what I always liked on the Mystery Science Theater episodes was throughout the one season. I think they're all in one season, and throughout the one season they're watching all the Gamera films, and then you know the format of Mystery Science Theater. They come on, the Mads are there, and they're like gonna torture them, and the guys are supposed to be like down and depressed because they have to go into the theater. And that episode they come in, and the Mads are like all laughing sinister and everything, and the guys are celebrating, and they're like, "Why are you celebrating?" They're like, "It's our last Gamera film." So, Gamera is great. I have not seen the 90s movies, save for the first one, so I need to get around to seeing them.
Yeah, my big worry is that I am over praising these films, but the thing is...
It's a kaiju film, I know what to expect.
But, I know, but the thing is, I just really love and enjoy the films, and I appreciate them because, to me, I think they work on different levels.
Right.
And there is a lot of meat and substance to these movies that you would not expect from kaiju films. At least not ones from that period.
Okay, my number 4 is The Alien Queen from Aliens and further Alien movies after that. I've mentioned repeatedly Aliens is my all-time favorite movie. I love the Xenomorph, and I thought about putting the Xenomorph on this list because... yeah, he's much more prevalent, but man, the Queen is great. The whole concept of the Queen is great in Aliens, and we get that great fight between her and Ripley, and we get the whole sequence of Ripley going down in the nest and everything, and the Queen is fantastic. And even her later appearances in Alien Resurrection and Alien vs. Predator, the first one, like, she's got... not nearly the power and not nearly the level of profile as she does in Aliens, but she's still just cool to see because she's so much bigger than the rest of the aliens, the rest of the xenomorphs, and just the 2 little arms, in the front, and the more of a spider-like body and everything, and then connected to the ovipositor and everything. And she is awesome. She is the best thing that James Cameron ever created. I remember where my one friend used to live, there was a park, and this guy lived behind the park, and he basically had a, made out of, like, black pipes, like the silhouette of the Queen. So you'd drive by at night, and you'd just see the silhouette, and it would look like the alien Queen was standing there. It was fantastic. She's great. She's absolutely great. And just the worthy foe for Ripley for the end of that movie.
Oh, definitely. The thing with the Xenomorph is, okay, the Queen is the final boss.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
The Xenomorph is no match for Ripley. When you get to Aliens, they have to throw hundreds of them at her to slow her down. Ripley is so awesome, they had to create the Queen, this super Xenomorph, to come close to rivaling her. And that is one of the epic showdowns between Ripley and the Queen. Yeah, that character is so much more impressive than the Xenomorph. I will give that the Xenomorph has the much more iconic look,
mm-hmm.
and maybe plays a little more on primal fears, but for star power, it's the Queen.
Yeah, I mean, and even like if you've ever played the Alien vs. Predator arcade game from Capcom, you've got the moment. It's the same moment that's in Aliens, but you get the moment where the one military guy comes out and he's like one of the bad guys, and he comes out to brag to you, and he's laughing and everything, and then you just see the tail snake down and come in and slice him in half like it does to Bishop in the movie, and then oh, this is the final boss battle of the game. I gotta fight a Queen, other appearances that the Queen has made in video games are usually really good too. So, Yeah, the Alien Queen. I'm looking at the pop figure of her right now, and she's just awesome. Derek, what is your number 3?
My number 3, okay, is the Gill Man from the Creature from the Black Lagoon film series. Okay, I had Gamera as my number 4, and I did make the point that I could have easily put Gamera as my number 1. Okay, and the point is the Gamera movies from the 90s actually mean a heck of a lot to me. I think they are incredibly good films. I think the third one in particular is phenomenal. And so, as I said, it's my top 100. The Creature from the Black Lagoon film series, I like the film series. I think the first is the best. I think they get a little less quality as they go because they got a little cheaper as they went. But I don't hold any of those 3 films nearly in as much regard as the 90s Gamera. The reason the Gill Man places higher on my list is simply because of that design. That is one of the most iconic designs in pop culture of the 20th century, as far as I'm concerned. There are very few monsters or creatures that look as good as the Gill Man, and I'd just like to quickly give a shout out to the designer of the Gill Man, which was former Disney illustrator Millicent Patrick, who unfortunately did not get the recognition as being the creator during her lifetime.
Right.
For some reason, because she was a woman. But I mean, the Gill Man is just. We're talking about a character that came 20 years after the start of what we consider really the Universal Monsters.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the late addition to the Universal Monster series.
I think the first film, Creature from the Black Lagoon, was, 1953?
That sounds right.
And by that point, the Universal Monsters was dead. And, you had the House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, and even the Abbott and Costello made Frankenstein were at least 5 years, almost 10 years before. So that was a huge gap. Then all of a sudden, this movie comes out of nowhere, in a period where we are going to be basically stuck for a decade with monsters that are just giant insects that are extremely large size for the next 10 years. Except for this one film where you have this really cool, kind of almost sexy, slinky creature. And the effects in that film, the makeup design and everything, I mean, that was just so cool. They end up being, and you kind of had the footprints for that in so many other things. One of my recent favorite movies of the last decade was Shape of Water, which is basically a love story remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon to a degree. And I don't know. It's just when I think of monsters, I think of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and that's a character that I love buying toys and stuff and have for the creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's even in Mad Monster Party, they changed his color to be purple instead of green, but it's it's no question who it's supposed to be,
Oh yeah.
And he showed up on the Abbott and Costello TV show. He showed up on Addams Family at one point. Was it Addams Family or was it Munsters? I think it was Munsters.
It's the Munsters.
Yeah.
It's not the Addams Family. It's the Munsters because the Munsters was essentially a sitcom version of the
Universal Monsters. Yeah.
And he was, was it Uncle Gilbert?
Yeah, Gilbert or Gilman or something like that. Where it was a play on the Gill Man.
Right. I think it was Uncle Gilbert, but I might be mistaken. I have not watched the Munsters in a few years. But yeah.
And
that was a weird show, but yeah.
And I've heard for years about it's Uncle Gilbert. I heard for years about Guillermo del Toro wants to do a remake of Creature of the Black Lagoon, and Universal didn't let him do it. and then he went and made Shape of Water.
Oh, Universal must be kicking themselves.
You would think.
You would think, but no, they keep putting out their garbage adaptations. Could have had an Oscar winner.
Yeah, and he's another one. He's great in Monster Squad.
Oh yeah, I love that design.
Yeah, they changed his face a little in that, but he still looks really cool.
His head looks a lot more like the head is basically a goldfish, but it's still recognizable. Man, the makeup design and costumes in Monster Squad are just so damn good. But yeah, the original Creature from the Black Lagoon. I remember being in high school, and I never got to read it, and I wasn't able to find them. But I can't remember if it was Dark Horse or Topps, but there was a comic book adaptation or sequel drawn by Art Adams.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the character is a favorite of Art Adams to draw. And man, he just looks so good in Art Adams' art style, because his intricate detail and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny. My number 4 pick is something that has a lot of substance and meaning to me, but my number 3 is largely based on just the visual and the design. But that is such an incredible design.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you see versions of that basic design show up in Hotel Transylvania and Nightmare Before Christmas. On The Simpsons. He's as much of one of the main Universal monsters as Dracula, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein. I would say he's even more so than the Invisible Man.
Oh yeah. Heck, they even use his design in Monsters vs. Aliens.
Yeah.
The animated movie.
And let's not forget the A-Team.
I am blanking on that.
Well, Hannibal used to play the Aquamaniac, and it was in the opening sequence where he was smoking a cigar through the little face portal thing on the costume.
That's right. I forgot about that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, my number 3 pick is the Gill Man from The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
All right. My number 3, it's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I really wanted to get him on this list because to sort of diversify things a little, but there's something about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that, like going back to seeing Ghostbusters, and we're going to talk about Ghostbusters next week, but going back to seeing Ghostbusters when I was a kid, where it was like, he's equally absurd and terrifying. Like, it's a big marshmallow guy in a sailor hat. It's such a weird design, but then you look at it and go, he's towering over these buildings. He's crushing everything in his path, And as you said, some of your picks mean a lot to you, and some of them are just striking visuals to you. This one might just be a striking visual to me. It's a thing I remember a lot. I love the concept of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and I love the concept of, we're not going to conjure up a monster that's going to destroy you, and Ray thinks of the thing that's going to hurt them the least, because it couldn't possibly hurt them, and it shows up as, 1,000,000 feet high.
Yeah, if you really think about it, it would be as if they were attacked by the Pillsbury Doughboy.
I always assumed it was either supposed to be a take on the Pillsbury Doughboy or the Michelin Man. Probably more the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Probably.
And
I
you
can see both.
Some people don't notice this, but you can see ads and stuff earlier in the film for Stay Puft Marshmallows, and Dana has a package of Stay Puft Marshmallows in her apartment.
Right. Whenever the eggs start frying themselves on the counter.
Right.
The counter has the bag of marshmallows. Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. We are definitely overusing this word in these picks tonight, but I'm sorry, I got to use it again. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is iconic of the 1980s.
Oh yeah.
He's one of the great monsters of 1980s movies.
I mean, what was that phone company last year that did the commercial where it was like you were watching all your favorite entertainment on your phone, and it was like the DeLorean driving through a bunch of scenes from different things in the movie of 80s movies, and one of the things at the end is it flies past the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I can't think of what it was. I'm not even sure I've seen that commercial.
Yeah, he's one of the biggest recognizable things from the movie. I saw somebody in a shirt the other day that was the Jurassic Park logo, but it said Central Park, and instead of the T-Rex, it was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Okay, I'm going to be Googling that later.
It, as a balloon shows up in the Ghostbusters remake, it was in all the cartoons. It basically been in every version of Ghostbusters, It is the physical manifestation of a Sumerian god. It's a giant marshmallow man.
Right. He was in the opening credits of the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and he was a factor in a few of the different episodes of the cartoon. So
Aykroyd said in his original script, it's something that seems harmless and puffy and cute, but in the right circumstances, anything can be made into black and become evil, So it's actually an interesting kind of somewhat deep concept for a monster in a movie like this. So,
well, I totally found the T-shirt. Oh my goodness, I like that. That is clever. Yeah, I love the Stay Puft Marshmallow. It's one of the big exciting moments from my childhood in movies.
Yeah, it's definitely probably as a young kid who didn't necessarily understand a lot of the humor in Ghostbusters, all the sardonic stuff, like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is one of the things that keeps me watching that film till I get to the point where I'm getting smarter and understanding more and more of it, So yeah, something that could possibly never ever harm us, Mr. Stay Puft. Derek, your number 2.
Oh, my number 2 is quite possibly the movie monster that most amazed and appealed to me as a small child. One that was basically synonymous with movies, and that is King Kong. King Kong was we talk about the images, we talk about imagery. When I was a kid, I was, I raised on like watching older movies and stuff. My dad would show me westerns, and I grew up on John Wayne and all that stuff, and I watched a lot of Humphrey Bogart and World War II films and a lot of the old comedies and stuff and all that. I basically had to discover King Kong on my own, but even when I was 3 years old, I knew who King Kong was. There are just certain characters that I was always aware of that I cannot remember a period of not knowing who they were. And those would be characters like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and Mickey Mouse, and King Kong.
Mm-hmm.
I have a door-length poster that is King Kong on top of the Empire State Building, which Kong and the top of the building is just the top quarter of the poster. The rest going straight down is just you're following the entire, or at least the top third of the Empire State Building for the rest of the poster. I have had that since 1990 or 1991. I believe I bought that in spring 91 on an art field trip to the big modern art museum in Ottawa, and that poster has stayed with me all these years, almost 30 years, just because if I see something with King Kong on it, I'm really tempted to buy it. Growing up, I loved the 1933 film. My favorite King Kong movie, this is controversial, but my favorite King Kong movie is the 1976 version.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being a kid and shocked whenever the trailers came out on television, the teasers for King Kong Lives, where the movie was nowhere near as good as the teasers.
Right.
But one moment from when I was a kid that stuck with me for a long time was being, I think 10 years old, whenever the teasers were on television, and there was that one moment in the trailer for King Kong Lives where it's people running, screaming, and Kong steps on a guy.
Yeah.
And that is just an image that has long stuck with me. Godzilla was a character. I've long known who Godzilla was. I grew up knowing who Godzilla was. But Godzilla not appeal to me the same way that Kong did. Kong just seemed to be like on another level of movie stardom, at least through my perception.
To Westerners, Kong is a huge movie star. That's how they look at Godzilla in Japan. But a lot of times in the West, we look at Godzilla as this weird, cheesy thing that came from Japan. But we don't look at King Kong that way. We look at King Kong as a big American superstar.
Right. I remember it was a huge deal back in the 80s whenever I was growing up, whenever the Universal tours and that had introduced that big King Kong ride.
Yeah.
With the giant animatronic Kong. That was a major deal. That got news coverage.
Right. I see. The thing with King Kong, going back to my childhood, is I remember anything with King Kong being an event. I remember it being a big deal when the 70s movie came out, and the first time we watched it, like that, I think my dad got it on VHS, and we watched it. So me and my younger brother, it was for sure our first time watching it. It might have been my older brother's first time watching it. And it was like a big deal that we were watching a King Kong film. My mom repeatedly has told me the story of going to see the 30s film in a re-release during probably the early 50s when she was a kid, and being terrified because it was at a drive-in theater and they had a life-size inflatable Kong by the concession stand. And my mom has told me the story so many times throughout my life that it's like one of those things that's just ingrained in my DNA, that, oh yeah, Grandma took us to see King Kong and they had a big inflatable Kong and I was so scared of it, it's just like probably like when she was like 8, it's like always an event and it was a huge deal to me when they made the new movie in 2005. And that movie is, some people like that movie and some people don't. That movie is such a love letter to the 30s version that I don't know how you can take it any other way, And then we were worried about Skull Island because we love the character so much and we weren't sure what the heck was going on with Skull Island. It ended up being much better than we expected it to be. I always quote Roger Ebert always used to say, depending on what day of the week you ask me, either Citizen Kane or King Kong is my favorite movie of all time. I mean, that's saying something. Mm-hmm. Ebert being the respected critic that he was and being such an advocate for Citizen Kane being the best movie ever made, as many critics from his era were, to say, but sometimes it's King Kong that's my favorite movie. I use the same nomenclature when I talk to people in the store about my favorite Batman story. I always say it's Dark Knight Returns, except for some days of the week it's Year One. Mm-hmm. It's because it's just the mood that strikes you. But yeah, I mean, King Kong in the West, I think, is revered among Hollywood. He is a Hollywood superstar. He always has been.
Gosh. When I was a kid, the big superstars for the old Hollywood were, John Wayne, Marilyn Monroe, Humphrey Bogart, and King Kong. King Kong was in the same breath as
absolutely
other stars.
And and the next time we get to see him, he's going to be going one-on-one with Godzilla again.
Yeah, I think that fight might be rigged. What's the name of the movie? The next movie coming out is Godzilla versus...
No, the next movie coming out...
I'm sorry. Yeah, next movie coming out is Godzilla King of Monsters.
King of Monsters.
And then he's going to fight Kong in the next one. Yeah, I think it's going to be a rigged fight.
Well, Kong was never called King Kong in Skull Island. Other than John C. Reilly's character does say at one point he's king around here, but they never call him King Kong. He's just Kong.
Right. In fact, I think at one point Sam Jackson's character says, "I'm the king around here," or something like that.
But no, I can't wait to see him again. Yeah. And I can't wait to see him fight Godzilla again. So, all right. Moving on. My number 2 might surprise some people that he's this high on the list, but it's Smaug from The Hobbit: The Desolation of Smaug. Why? Because first of all, I love Smaug in the book The Hobbit. I love Smaug in the cartoon of The Hobbit. Smaug has the best monologue of any character in any Tolkien work. When he's describing how powerful he is, when Bilbo is messing with him, and he goes through my armor is tenfold steel, my teeth are like spears, my claws are like swords, my wings are hurricanes. That whole thing is great. It's one of the best things Tolkien ever wrote. Take all that and put it into one of the best, if not the best, CGI creatures I've ever seen, and then give it Benedict Cumberbatch's voice. That is movie magic. I loved Smaug in that movie. I know people have varying opinions of the Hobbit movies, but if you just take Smaug on his own, I don't see how you can possibly not consider him to be one of the best monsters ever in a movie.
No, my thing with the Hobbit films is they are occasionally entertaining. I'm not really a fan of the movies, but Smaug is the single greatest use of CGI in those films. I think the CGI in the Hobbit movies overall is overused and too glossy and too fake looking, except for Smaug. For some reason, Smaug is just perfect. Smaug is basically the star of that trilogy. He's the best thing in that.
And
you mentioning the Smaug's speech?
Yeah.
Man, I'm sorry. I'm just picturing Richard Boone saying those lines from the animated version.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I grew up with that, and I grew up hearing that repeatedly, because I watched that so much as a kid. But then, I remember when I went to see Desolation of Smaug in the theater, I knew it was coming, and Bilbo goes down the hole, and he's in there, and he's invisible and everything, and then I literally pulled out my phone and started the voice recorder and recorded about 40 minutes of the movie just so I could listen to Benedict Cumberbatch do the Smaug speech when I got home, because I didn't want to miss any of it. My only knock on Smaug in that movie is that they made his forelimbs into the wings, which technically makes him a wyvern and not a dragon, but his design is a dragon, not a wyvern. So I would have preferred him to have the 4 legs and then the separate wings, but and then his destroying the town at the beginning of the next movie is really good too. So, but yeah, it's just everything about his face, the way his eyes move, everything. He is just perfectly constructed. He's one of the best put together monsters I've ever seen in a movie. And yeah,
he is easily top 5 best CGI creatures in movie history.
I think I like him better than I like Gollum, as far as a CGI character.
Oh, you might be right.
So
might be better. Gollum at certain points in the original trilogy gets a little too rubbery looking.
Oh, here and there, yes.
But Smaug is just, he looks powerful and he looks like he has weight, which is saying a lot because a lot of the CGI in the Hobbit trilogy does not feel like it has weight or substance, but he does. It's a perfect blend of a powerful actor performance and special effects performance. Almost make me want to watch the movies.
So yeah, Smaug is my number 2, and we're getting to the end here. So what is your number 2?
I'm
sorry. What is your number 1?
My number 1 is the other iconic character from my childhood that filled me with wonder and awe and both thrilled and terrified me. The first being King Kong and the other being Frankenstein. And I am referring to the Boris Karloff Frankenstein. The character gets a little goofy looking when you have Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi wearing the makeup, because they had the kind of more of a puffier face. So it looked like, quite frankly, whenever Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi were wearing the makeup, it looked like Frankenstein was retaining water. Whereas Karloff in that makeup, and then Glenn Strange, the later movies might not have been good, but Glenn Strange looked incredible in that makeup. They both looked like walking corpses. But they had all the lines and their jaws and their cheeks and all that. And man, Frankenstein is just, I don't know what it is. The performance, okay, I said earlier the performance with Lugosi as Dracula cast a long shadow, but there's not, okay, at his heart, Dracula still basically looks like late 19th century magician,
Okay.
but nothing up to that point looked like the Frankenstein design. It was such a singular look, and every version of Frankenstein that has come since is basically either ripping it off or trying desperately to not look like it and just looks crappy. I can't think of a better word. Sorry, overusing the word, but the iconic look of that makeup is just anything that does not look like it just looks wrong whenever you're talking about Frankenstein. Okay, I'm a big fan of the Hammer horror film series. The Frankenstein film series, because they did not have the rights to the makeup, they decided to focus more on Dr. Frankenstein, which is why you end up with the main character of those movies is really Peter Cushing as Baron Frankenstein, rather than it being the monster. And what you end up getting is really inconsistent looks for the monsters from film to film, and it's never really the same monster twice in any one of those given Hammer Frankenstein films. But the Karloff makeup, the Karloff performance, that is just, it's one of the all-time great images in movie history. And then Karloff's performance in that first film and then in Bride just gave the character so much heart and humanity and hurt and quiet rage that you could actually understand. It's just an incredible, powerful performance in what could have been a ridiculous film, which we know because the later films with different actors and that ended up becoming much more, campy and ridiculous.
Right. To me, the moment with Frankenstein, the moment that if anyone says, how do you take Frankenstein seriously, the moment I always point to is in the first film when they bring him into the light for the first time. When he basically discovers light for the first time. And the performance by Karloff is fantastic. I mean, it's like a child being born,
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful performance. It's a child being born, but being born into rage.
So I mentioned Dracula earlier and how it always goes back to, my knowing him from my childhood. The thing is, I didn't really get into Frankenstein until probably my mid to late 20s. I love Karloff as the monster, but I discovered him much later in life than I did Dracula. So that's why he rates slightly lower for me. But yeah, like I said, that scene and then like everything he does in Bride of Frankenstein is great. A lot of what he does in Son of Frankenstein is great. So.
Mm-hmm. My experience is a little bit similar to yours in that I did not finally see the original Universal Monsters movies until I was in my mid to late 20s. It was not until they finally released them in the Legacy collection.
Mm-hmm.
that those are the Universal collections that they released to tie in with the Van Helsing film. I'm saying that for the listeners. And those were the first time that I ever actually saw all the movies from start to finish. The only one that I saw as a child was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But the Karloff Frankenstein was such a major pop culture icon that you could not grow up without being aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
or seeing it, or seeing the spoofs or homages or references to it through movies and television shows that came out in the 40s through to the 80s. Monster Squad was a huge thing when I was a kid, and Tom Noonan's portrayal of Frankenstein in that is really kind of a much more childlike, innocent version of the Karloff take. Whereas the Karloff take is much more tempered with kind of a rage to the character. The Noonan character is much even further, much more of a child, innocent. And Frankenstein was just one of those images that just filled me with wonder and awe, exactly like King Kong. This is purely coincidental, but right over my left shoulder, where I am recording right now, on my wall is a mini 11 by 17 inch reprint that I bought 20 years ago at an old chain store that we used to have called San Diego, which is a reprint of one of the King Kong 1933 posters. And right under it is a print that I made myself on photo paper about, I think, 12 years ago, which is just Karloff's face from the publicity photo from the original Frankenstein 1931, and they're side by side. And those are the two big horror fantasy things from old Hollywood that most appealed to me when I was a kid. That's why King Kong and Frankenstein are my number one and my number two all-time favorite movie monsters.
I mean, I'll go back to the monster cereals again. I mean, and with Frankenberry, you know.
Frankenberry was my favorite. Yeah, I'm standing up. I'm looking at the Frankenstein picture right now. Man, it's just awesome.
All right, so to finish off the list, my number one. We've mentioned him a million times tonight. He is the king of the monsters. He is Godzilla. Do I have to say anything here? I think Godzilla's topped another one of my lists in the past. Godzilla's great, man. Godzilla's dark, scary metaphor for nuclear disaster, fun, goofy, fighting giant monster, good guy. Talk about a character that can be reinterpreted.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
You know, and he's, like, been there throughout my life in different forms, and almost in the form that I needed him to be at the time, at any given time in my life, you know? It's like, it was the Showa series that I was watching on, you know, reruns when I was a kid, to the Heisei series coming out when I was in high school and college, and, you know, like, the modern stuff that's been really good so far, you know, yeah, he's Godzilla. He's awesome. He is a giant dinosaur with flaming breath. There's nothing I can't say about Godzilla that's not cool. And like I said, whether he's teaming with a giant robot against two monsters in a wrestling match, or essentially, or fighting King Kong, or you know, leading 12 other monsters to fight King Ghidorah and destroy all monsters, Godzilla he's it. He is the best monster ever. He's certainly my favorite. And I don't think I have anything else to say there.
Yeah, basically everything I was going to say about Godzilla, you've already said. I said earlier about the amazing versatility of Dracula. Godzilla is a character that you would never think would have versatility. He sure does. You have the somber nuclear Holocaust portrayal of the character in his original appearance, and then 10 years later, or 10 to 15 years later, you have Godzilla as basically Batman 66 running around and clicking his heels and saving humanity from bigger, goofier monsters. And then everything in between, Godzilla's been it. He's been parodied in his own franchises. He's been, like, the source of dramatic, metaphorical stories. And that it is amazing how versatile the character has been.
Mm-hmm.
He's also had American comic books by Marvel Comics, where he had the Avengers and Spider-Man make guest appearances.
Yep, he fought Thor. He fought Spider-Man.
Not a lot of monsters can say that.
So I think that wraps up our list.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a pretty good list. I think it was fun. And yeah.
So we have a listener email, and we're going to try to get through this quickly, but at the same time, it's going to take a little bit of a discussion. But, you know, we didn't do a show last week, so we can fit it in. So this is from our friend Dan. And
Dan, that sounds made up.
He writes, "Hey there, professional podcasters. This week I've been scouring IMDb in search of horror movies because I've decided to attempt to observe the 5th annual Hooptober, named after horror legend Tobe Hooper. The event encourages members of the Letterboxd .com community, which I mentioned Letterboxd earlier. I don't know if you use Letterboxd, but it's a fun site for tracking movie stuff.
I do not.
It basically lets you make a list of all the movies that you've seen, and then also keep a diary of when you've seen them. And I've been using it for the last 2 or 3 years, and I basically every time I see a movie, I log it, so I can look back at I can look back at this diary of when I watched what. And you can, every time you log the movie, you can give it a rating, and the rating, then on your master page, the rating will fluctuate with what you've rated it each time. Anyway, the Letterboxd community to watch and review 31 horror films in the run-up to Halloween. It also comes with a set of criteria that should be met by your 31 flicks to make sure you have to get a little creative with your choices. As a couple of sin-literate souls, I thought you two might have some suggestions for films to fulfill these criteria. Before I read the rules, I'm going to go to the bottom of his email where he says, bonus points to discuss how well do the spooky movies that you've watched or plan to watch this season stack up to the criteria. I think we're just going to cover that as I go over the list. So, and then he says, thanks, dummies, Dan. So here are the rules.
That's nice.
Here are the rules. 10 anniversary films released years end in 8. Excluding 2018. Films from 6 different countries. Films from 6 different decades. Films from before 1970. 6 films from before 1970. 6 films from the following directors: Romero, Cronenberg, Clive Barker, Terence Fisher, Sergio Martino, and Bill Lustig. You can mix and match or all of one. 2 Flying Things That Kill You films. 1 silent film as a tribute to A Quiet Place. 1 aquatic menace as a tribute to The Meg. 2 women-directed films. 1 inanimate object comes alive film. 1 film with Barbara Crampton in it. And 2 Tobe Hooper films, because there must always be a Hooper film. I'm going to pull up my Letterboxd and see what I've been watching and see what we do here.
I'm going to say 2 anniversary films that end with an 8. Off the top of my head, for 1978 is Halloween, which also qualifies under the John Carpenter. And I'm also going to suggest Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is 1948.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember what year Son of Frankenstein was.
Son of Frankenstein is 39.
39, yeah.
Okay, so right off the bat, Barbara Crampton, I got Re-Animator. We've already watched.
Oh, Re-Animator, yeah, definitely. The other one is I have not seen it. I keep wanting to see it. Is she had a bit of a comeback a couple of years ago? I think 3-4 years ago with a film, an adult horror film, and by adult I mean something that actually deals with adult situations in story. Called We're Still Here, which got quite a bit of acclaim. So I've been wanting to see that myself.
So before 1970, I've already watched The Birds.
Well, Psycho.
Well, yeah, but I'm going by what I've already watched.
Fine.
I've already watched The Birds. I've already watched Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein. I'm quickly making notes here, so.
I'm doing this all off the top of my head. I have no notes.
I've already watched...
I don't even have the criteria in front of me.
I've already watched War of the Worlds. You have access to the email. Also, he sent us the criteria individually earlier in the week. 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm up to 5. And I'm going to count Mad Monster Party. So I've already watched 6 from before 1970.
Okay, I have not watched any... other than the few that I watched with you, I've not really watched many by myself in the last couple of weeks. But during the summer, I did rewatch a bunch of my Hammer films. Horror of Dracula, as it's known in the U.S. In the U.K., it's just Dracula, 1958, qualifies for a couple of the different categories there. That's the one with Peter Cushing as Van Helsing and Christopher Lee as Dracula. So I watched that. I watched Brides of Dracula, which is really, really good. Oh, there's a whole bunch of Vincent Price ones that would qualify for this.
Yeah, the Fly, House of Wax.
House of Wax, yeah. The Fly, that's 1958, isn't it?
Oh, let's look.
I think it is. So that qualifies as an anniversary if it is.
The Fly, 1958.
There we go. I watched Rabid this summer. That qualifies under Cronenberg. It does not qualify for before 1970. But if we're gonna do Cronenberg, the two I recommend are Rabid, which I just love that movie, and The Fly remake.
Right.
For Tobe Hooper, you definitely watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
You can watch Salem's Lot and Poltergeist, which is one of my top 5 favorite movies.
Aquatic Menace, I would just go with Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, you can go with Creature from the Black Lagoon. You can go with Shape of Water. You can go with Jaws.
Right. Silent film, not just watch Nosferatu. Don't don't beat yourself up over this. Just watch Nosferatu. It's you can find it on YouTube and just knock it out. Inanimate Object Comes Alive. We've already watched Child's Play. In fact, we didn't have that on our list of things we did this week.
Oh, I forgot to add it.
But we did watch Child's Play last week.
Well, that's 1988, so that's another anniversary.
It's another anniversary film, so that qualifies as two.
The other ones for inanimate objects, I think The Blob would qualify. I recommend the 1986 remake more than the original. I think the remake's a much better film. The Stuff qualifies.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as I said, it's evil soft serve ice cream. Technically, killer tomatoes.
War of the Worlds kind of goes for things that are flying.
Yeah, things that are flying is a bit tougher. I would maybe consider Lost Boys because we do get a couple of flying shots.
Right. Any kaiju films with flying kaiju, Mars Attacks.
Oh, Mothra, Gamera.
Right. King Ghidorah, Rodan. I think we weren't really keeping track, but we probably got our 6 decades covered with all the stuff we've already said.
Okay. One of the criteria was films from 6 different countries.
Yes. Now that's going to start getting interesting.
Well, American ones we already named a bunch. I named a few British ones. For Spain, I would recommend The Orphanage, which was produced by Guillermo del Toro, which came out in 2007, I think. That's a very good movie. I really like that. Also for Guillermo del Toro, I would recommend his first feature film, which was Kronos, which is a Mexican production. Also has Ron Perlman in it.
I would recommend Pan's Labyrinth, which is Mexican Spain production. So.
Okay, Canadian. You have anything from like the early '80s cheesy stuff with like Jamie Lee Curtis, like Prom Night and Terror Train. There's also Rabid, which I did mention for Cronenberg. That's also a Canadian film, so that qualifies. Ginger Snaps, which was a teenage werewolf film from the late 1990s, which was Canadian, which was kind of a black comedy too.
You know what? Let's go. I would recommend The Man Who Laughs is both an anniversary film, 1928, and it'll get you a film from the 20s, so that if you're trying to get your decades filled out, one for 6 decades. So that's a good one.
Isn't that also a silent film?
Oh yeah, you're right. It's also a silent film, so you get 3 criteria knocked off of that one.
Another silent film that I would recommend is the Lon Chaney Sr. Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
I can't remember what year that was. I want to say 28, but I think it might be earlier. Okay. For foreign films, I don't know. If you can stomach extreme torture porn and gore, you can probably go with any of the early 2000 French extreme horror films like Martyrs or High Tension. But I have a kind of a fondness for the 1970s, early 80s erotic horror films done by Jean Rollin. My favorite being Fascination, which was 1979, I think, and 1982's The Living Dead Girl. I really like those movies. Trying to think of other ones.
American Werewolf in London kind of counts as a UK film, so
Yeah.
co-American.
That's another one of my all-time favorites. Oh gosh, more pre-1970. I would recommend The Haunting. Oh, and oh gosh, I've just forgot the name. Blanked on. Deborah Kerr.
Shining also counts as a
The
UK
Innocents.
film.
The Innocents, which is much more of a psychological. Really good psychological horror film from Hammer that people don't really seem to remember is Scream of Fear.
Oh yeah.
With Christopher Lee in one of his rare heroic portrayals. Another Italian horror film that I really like from the early 70s, starring Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Telly Savalas, is Horror Express. It's one of those films that is in public domain, so you can find like a lot of cheapo DVDs, but it's actually a really, really good horror film about a killer monster on a train I don't think it's is it the Orient Express or the Trans-Siberian? I can't remember which train it is, but that's a really good one. Oh, Rosemary's Baby is a good film. The Exorcist, but Legend of Hell House is a good 70s horror film.
Oh, you want a Mexican one? Watch any of El Santo's movies when he's fighting a monster.
I really need to rewatch Kronos. I finally got it on Criterion at the beginning of the year, but I never got around to watching it yet. Another one from 1930s that I would recommend for the decade is Freaks.
Oh yeah, Freaks is great. That's a movie that everybody should see at least once.
And I'm quickly checking the year for one of my favorite Vincent Price films. I say favorite because it is such a good movie, although it's not a pleasant watch. Year is it? 1968. So it qualifies for the anniversary. Is The Witchfinder General, which is also known as The Conqueror Worm, which is where Vincent Price plays actual historical man named Michael. I think it was Matthew Hopkins, who back in the 1600s was a self-styled English witch hunter who basically went around, and if he didn't like you, he would claim you were a witch and brutally torture and murder you. And did it to get property and rob people and rape and pillage, essentially, under authority. It is one of the really good straight performances that Price has given, and it's chilling. If you want Vincent Price a little more comedic and goofy, I recommend The Theatre of Blood, which is a UK film, so that qualifies for that. I would also recommend the two films, The Abominable Dr. Phibes and Dr. Phibes Strikes Again.
Yeah, those are always good.
Yeah, I love those movies. Those are ridiculous, but they are real favorites of mine.
I feel like we should have mentioned at least one version of Phantom of the Opera.
Well, I mentioned the silent film.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. So, yeah. So it does that answer your question, Dan? We gave you a bunch of movies there.
Oh, okay. I said one Carpenter film, and that was Halloween. I'm gonna give him one more. That's The Fog, which I think is actually a pretty good ghost film.
Okay.
Yeah. There are countless other horror movies I can mention, but I'll leave it at that.
There's an Italian version of Phantom of the Opera from '98, so there's two criteria met for you.
There's a Hammer version with Herbert Lom, but that's 1961, 62, I think.
Yeah, 1962.
Some of my favorite modern horror films are they don't qualify under the year, but I love The First Conjuring and Annabelle Creation, and I really like the first two Insidious films.
There is a sort of cheap version of Dunwich Horror from 1970 that I would recommend seeing at least once if you have any passing interest in Lovecraft.
Is that the one with Dean Stockwell?
Yeah, Dean Stockwell's in that.
Okay, I don't think I've ever seen that one.
I've seen it one time. Yeah, Dean Stockwell plays Wilbur Watley in that, and Talia Shire is in it for like almost a blink in you miss her type role, but still she's in there.
A good early 1960s black and white horror film is Carnival of Souls.
I keep thinking of films as I'm looking them up to see what years they were. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have any other big ones I can think of. But I stopped taking notes right at the beginning there. So, but we named a lot.
Yeah, I don't have my horror movie DVDs facing me. If I did, I'd just be naming them off of that. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That's 1988, is it not? Or was it 89? I think it was 88. If so, that qualifies under the anniversary films.
Killer Clowns from Outer Space, 1988.
So there we go. We mentioned that, I believe, on the last episode of this podcast.
Yeah, and on this episode. So, yeah. So you need any more? I think we got you covered. We gave you a pretty good list there. I'm sure we didn't fill out everything, but what do we got to do all the work around here? So thanks for the email, Dan, and let's get on to getting out of here. You can send us an email like Dan just did, DerekandMattLoveComics@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/DerekandMatt, on Twitter @DerekandMatt, Instagram @DerekandMatt, on YouTube @DerekandMattLoveComics. The show is available on iTunes, Podbeam, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes. It really helps the show. For any information that you need on Galactic Gregs, go to galacticgregs.com or facebook.com/galacticgregs. You can reserve your copy of The Walking Dead with the Galactic Gregs cover on galacticgregs.com. So check that out. Next week on Derek and Matt Love Comics, we already said it, but we'll say it again. Derek, what are we doing?
We are going to be reviewing and discussing a little-known indie film from 1984. I think it's called Ghostbusters.
I am calling for a moratorium on that joke.
I'm going to forget and just keep doing it.
Yes, we are going to be watching and discussing Ghostbusters from 1984. Something I've wanted to do on this show. It was on my short list of things to do on the show from the very beginning. So I'm glad we're finally getting it in.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we actually did an episode on the remake before we ever got around to doing the original film.
Well, one of our concepts for the pilot episode of this show was to do the remake because it was coming out and it was so controversial at the time. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, we did the remake. We're going to do the original. After that, we're going to do the sequel. So we'll get them all done. Music for this episode is Hero Theme and Adventure Meme by Kevin MacLeod. Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Derek, any last words?
I would just like to take a moment and say to Stormy that he will be missed and we still love him.
And I would like to make a quote from Dwight Fry from The Bride of Frankenstein. What do you say, pal? Let's give ourselves up and let him hang us. This is no life for murderers.